Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. The time I flew a box I shouldn't have. The cold, dry wind whistled against the fuselage of my Cessna 185. I brushed my hand along the line of rivets, a nervous habit, making sure none were loose. I glanced at my watch. He's late, I murmured to myself. I finished my pre-flight, screwing the fuel caps on tight, when I heard the sound of dirt and rocks flinging from tires. I hopped down from the wing and saw it. A silver F-150 hauling ass across the ramp. A man about 6 feet tall with greasy hair and a black leather jacket stepped out. He looked twitchy, his eyes scanning the empty airfield. You said 7:30, it's now 8:30. I said, crossing my arms. This thing isn't light, you know. He shot back, his voice strained. It took me 30 minutes just to get in bed. He gestured behind him. In the truck bed sat the cargo. It was a crate, maybe 4 feet long, made of dark, oily-looking wood and bound with thick, pitted iron straps. It looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a lake. What is it? I asked, walking closer. Don't know. Don't care, he said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. This is for you. The rest when you land at Miller Field. The weight of whatever the box is was astounding. It took both of us grunting and sweating to slide it into the back of the Cessna. It wasn't just heavy. It was a dead, dense weight that seemed to suck the energy out of you. When I slammed the cargo door shut, the whole plane seemed to groan. The takeoff was sluggish. I had to keep the nose higher than usual. The controls feeling mushy and unresponsive. My baby was complaining about the load. As I climbed out the valley, the last rays of sunlight painted the jagged peaks in strokes of orange and blood red. Below me, the world was a sea of dark pine and shadowed rock, unbroken by a single light. No roads, no houses, nothing. Out here, all the towers were dark. No flight plan, no radios. Just you and the sky. It's a freedom I used to crave. I leveled off at 10,000 feet, the engine settling into its familiar, comforting drone after putting into cruise. The air was smooth. I checked my gauges, all in the green. I leaned back, letting the autopilot do its job, and watched the first stars begin to prick the deep violet sky. It was peaceful. For a moment, I almost forgot about the strange cargo sitting just a few feet behind my head. That's when my left wing dipped. It wasn't turbulence. It was a slow, heavy roll, like the plane had suddenly gained 1,000 pounds on one side. I grabbed the yoke, my knuckles white, and fought it back to level. The autopilot whined fighting me before I clicked it off. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the instruments. Airspeed, altitude, engine temp, all normal. Then I saw the attitude indicator. My artificial horizon, the instrument I trusted with my life, was tilted at a sickening 40-degree angle. It showed the plane in a steep, unrecoverable bank, but the real horizon outside my window was perfectly straight. My inner ear screamed that we were level, but the instrument was lying. I tapped the glass. The little blue and brown ball didn't budge. As I stared, my magnetic compass, floating serenely in its housing, began to drift. It swung past north, then west, and kept going slowly, deliberately, until the big red was pointing directly ahead. It was pointing forward, through the instrument panel, through the engine block. No, not forward. It was pointing behind me. It was pointing at the box. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. This was an electrical failure. This was wrong. I forced my eyes away from the lying instruments and looked outside. I would fly by sight. Forget the panel. Just fly the plane. My hand trembled as I reached for the GPS, hoping for some semblance of sanity. The screen flickered to life. A small icon of a plane sat in the center of the map. According to the screen, I was still sitting on the ramp at Kistler's Pass. The flight timer in the corner of the screen read 1 second. I had been flying for over an hour, but the GPS claimed I had never left. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I was flying blind. My instruments were possessed. My GPS was stuck in a time loop, and there was no one to call. The radio was just a box of useless static. The only thing in my plane that seemed to have any sense of direction was pointing at the silent, dark crate in my cargo hold. I had to get it out. The thought was insane. Depressurize the cabin, muscle a cargo door open against a 120-knot wind, and somehow shove a crate of impossible weight out into the night. But it was the only thought that made any sense. As I contemplated the suicidal maneuver, my eyes drifted to the landscape below. The moon was bright, casting the jagged peaks in sharp, silver relief. I stared at the endless sea of rock and snow, and then I saw it. One of the peaks, a massive falling of granite miles away, seemed to shift. It wasn't a landslide. It was a slow, deliberate movement, like a great beast turning in its sleep. I blinked, my eyes watering from the strain, and when I looked again, it was just a mountain, still and silent. Was it real? Or was the thing in the box not just breaking my instruments, but breaking my mind too? The idea of ditching the crate vanished. If it could do that to a mountain, what would it do to me if I got any closer? No, the job was to fly it to Millerfield. So I would fly. I ignored the panel, a graveyard of flickering lies. I flew by the seat of my pants, my eyes fixed on the stars, my knuckles aching from my grip on the yoke. Hours bled into one another. The engine's drone seemed to warp, sometimes sounding like a whisper, sometimes a scream. Finally I saw them, a string of pale blue lights, impossibly faint in the vast darkness. Miller Field. I aimed for it like a man dying of thirst aimed for a mirage. The approach was a nightmare. My altimeter was frozen at 10,000 feet. I judged my descent by the growing size of the pine trees, my airspeed by the pitch of the wind screaming past the cockpit. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was wrong, that I was too fast, too steep. I ignored it all and trusted my eyes. The runway lights rushed up to meet me. I flared, held my breath, and waited for the impact. The tires kissed the asphalt with a gentle chirp. It was the smoothest landing of my life. I taxied toward the far end of the field, where a single, unblinking light marked a derelict hangar. An old black panel van with no windows was parked there, its engine off. As I cut my own engine, a figure stepped out of the van's shadow. It was a woman, tall and severe, dressed in a heavy canvas coat despite the mild night. She wore thick leather gloves. I stumbled out of the Cessna, my legs shaking. She didn't say hello. She just looked at me, her gaze analytical, then glanced at my plane. "The instruments?" she asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of curiosity. "They're shot," I rasped. She gave a single nod, as if I had just confirmed the weather. "Payment," she said, holding out an envelope identical to the first one. She and a man who emerged from the van, equally silent and grim, didn't ask for my help. They used a small wheel dolly to expertly slide the crate from my plane and into their van. The process was efficient, practiced. I stood there, dumbly holding the envelope, as they latched the van doors. The woman paused before getting in the driver's seat. "Get some rest," she said, her eyes boring into mine. "The influence fades with distance. You'll be fine by morning." Then she was gone, the van's taillights disappearing down a service road. I was alone. The silence of the airfield was absolute. After a long moment, I climbed back into the cockpit, my body aching. I slumped into the pilot's seat, and my eyes fell on the instrument panel. Everything was perfect. The attitude indicator was perfectly level. The compass pointed north. The GPS showed my plane sitting at the end of the runway at Millerfield, and the flight timer read 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds. It was all real. I stared out into the empty night, the cash on the seat beside me feeling colder than any wind. I had flown the box, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my soul, that I would never be the same. Story 2. I found a hidden room in my apartment. It wasn't empty. I moved into my new apartment about 3 months ago. It's a decently sized place in an older building downtown. The kind of place with creaky floors, high ceilings, and a constant low on the walls. Like the building itself is quietly breathing. It's not glamorous, but I like it. Cheap rent, nice light, and mostly quiet neighbors. Mostly, a week after I moved in, I started hearing thumps at night. I figure it was the upstairs tenant at first. Maybe they dropped something or had a hyper dog. But the pattern was weird. One thump, then silence, then 2 quick ones, then nothing for hours. Like someone was knocking, but not on my door. I ignored it. Cities are noisy. Then I started noticing cold spots. Specific spots, too. Like, one corner of the bedroom would feel like a fridge had been left open there, even with the windows shut and the heater running. That was when I joked to my friend that the place might be haunted. I laughed. She didn't. Week 4, I was moving my bookshelf and noticed something strange. The wall behind it sounded hollow. I tapped around it, and the sound changed about a foot from the floor. It was subtle, but definitely a different echo. My curiosity got the better of me, so I did what any irresponsible tenant with zero regard for their deposit would do. I pulled up the floorboard. It came up easily, too easily. Underneath was a small metal hatch. No dust on it, no spider webs, like it had been used recently. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The smell hit first. Damp, but not like mold, like old sweat and copper. The hatch led to a narrow crawl space, no taller than maybe 3 feet. It sloped downward under the apartment floor. My phone flashlight barely cut through the dark, but I could see that the tunnel curved left, out of sight. I should have closed it right there, but I didn't. I crawled in. The air got colder with every foot forward. I moved maybe 20 feet before the tunnel opened into a low, concrete room, maybe 10 by 10 feet with smooth walls like it had been deliberately constructed. It was too clean. No cobwebs, no debris, just dust, a single folding chair in the middle, and a wall covered in photographs. Dozens of them, all black and white, all of the same man. Some close-ups of his face, others from a distance. A few were of him sleeping. The most recent one, clearly taken with a phone camera, was of him walking into my building. I recognized the lobby wallpaper. I recognized the timestamp. It was 2 days ago. There was a note pinned under that photo. He lives here now. My blood turned to ice. I backed out slowly, quietly, not even daring to breathe too hard. I put the hatch back, shoved the bookshelf over it, and didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called my landlord, asked if the unit had a crawl space or access tunnels for maintenance. He said no, sounded confused, said there used to be a boiler room system under the building in the 60s, but it had been filled in decades ago. When I asked about previous tenants, he hesitated and said, people don't usually stay long in that unit. I moved out that weekend, didn't even bother packing everything. Some clothes, laptop, important documents. I left the rest. I didn't tell anyone why, not even my parents. They'd just worry. Last week, out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the building online, a forum thread. Some urban explorers had checked it out. Someone had posted a photo from inside a hidden room. It was the same room, same concrete walls, same folding chair. But now, there was a new photo on the wall. It was of me, sleeping. Story 3, Midnight Madness. We held a Midnight Madness sale roughly once a year at McPhee Audi. If you don't know what that is, plenty of stores do it. We keep the dealership open until midnight and run some special deals to drum up business. There's music and food to draw people in too. I actually kinda hated it. I get the point of it. I really do. But I don't get why it had to be a mandatory thing. Who's out there at 11:45 p.m. on a Friday night going, you know what I need to do right now? I need to buy a fucking car. We weren't exactly a high-traffic dealership. We were located roughly an hour outside of Edmonton, on a fairly quiet highway, without much else around us. It just seemed like a stupid gimmick for the sake of a stupid gimmick. But unfortunately, Terrence and Andy like stupid gimmicky sales. I'd been working at McPhee Audi for about 3 years, and I can honestly say Terrence and Andrew McPhee were the worst employers I'd ever had. Terrence was in his late 70s and didn't really have anything else aside from the dealership. So he spent most of his retirement bumming around, hovering over salespeople's shoulders to try and pass his sage advice on to them, most of which was downright ridiculous. Don't show them the Carfax report. They don't need to know the history of a vehicle. No matter what, a used car only had one owner. Always round the odometer down. Never mind the fact that his advice had gotten us audited by Ambit before. He was convinced he was right about everything at any given time for no other reason than because he'd been in car sales for 40 years. His son, Andy, was much somehow worse. Despite having the cushy position of general manager, Andy didn't actually do anything at the dealership. His dad was more a manager than he was, and he was retired. Andy basically just spent most of his day in his office with our internet sales manager, a guy by the name of Reese French, micromanaging vehicle descriptions, most of which he generated using ChatGPT, and giving Reese new landing pages to build. Andy loved his landing pages. To his credit, he was adamant that digital marketing was important, but he just went about everything in the stupidest way possible, building a landing page for every single possible thing that came to mind, never asking what value it actually brought to the website. He acted as if we were some high-traffic, cushy downtown dealership, as opposed to a middling luxury car dealership an hour outside of Edmonton. He used to waste money on some cushy ad agency to write all the copy for him, but once ChatGPT came along, that went out the window, and unfortunately that was in fact the closest thing to an intelligent decision I ever saw him make. He and Reese loved AI. I swear to God, it did more work at the dealership than either of them combined. Hell, they generated the landing page for the Midnight Madness sale, the website banners, the physical banners, and even the radio ad with AI. It all looked and sounded exactly as bad as you think it did. I'm ranting at this point. I'm sorry. I had a lot of grievances about that place. I only really stayed for the money, but I was hoping I'd find something better soon, and I never wanted anything like what happened. God, I'm still not sure how to describe it. I'm not sure if I'm crazy or if what I saw was real, and I'm honestly not sure which would be worse. On the night of the Midnight Madness sale, there were 9 of us at the dealership. Terrence was hovering around, trying to feel important. Andy spent most of his time outside on the grill, cooking hot dogs for customers who by that point mostly stopped showing up, and our sales manager, Jason Kale, was in his office going through the paperwork for the sales we'd made that night. Most of the salespeople were sort of just sitting around, snacking on free hot dogs and waiting for someone to come in. Kathy Nice was on her phone, playing some games she downloaded that currently took up way too much of her time. Tony Moss was out having a smoke break, while Sheena, Douglas, and Reese had been moving some of the cars we'd put out front back onto the lot. I remember Sheena complaining about having to be the one to move the cars, but that was pretty normal for her. Sheena complained about a lot of things. She was one of the newer hires, and I'd really hoped she wouldn't be sticking around. Just looking at her gave me a headache. She was somewhere in her late 30s, but had neon pink hair, wore tight, low-cut dresses that any reasonable dealership wouldn't have tolerated, and obnoxiously high fuck-me heels that were more or less useless for walking around the lot. She was rude too, treating everyone else like they were beneath her, and yet somehow Andy and Terrence let her get away with it. Everyone knew why. As the night wound down, I was up at the office with my boss, Janet McMahon. I actually didn't mind Janet. She was a little bit of a control freak, which got on my nerves sometimes, but she mostly meant well. We were handling some of the paperwork on our end for some of the sales we'd made that day. All in all, it had been a good night, or as good a night as being stuck at work from 9 a.m. to midnight could be, although I was more than ready to head home. The upstairs office space had a balcony that overlooked the dealership showroom, so I could still see and hear what was going on down there while Janet and I worked, and I could hear Sheena and Reese coming in from moving the cars back. Something smoking out there. I heard her saying, maybe an engine or something? What do you mean smoking? I heard Jason ask. Look, you don't see that? Something smoking out on the lot. I gravitated closer to the balcony out of curiosity. Sure enough, I could see smoke rising from the used section of the car lot. We weren't moving anything over there, Reese said, not sure what the hell's going on. Jason seemed to swear under his breath before going to the door and opening it. Go grab the fire extinguisher, he said. Have a phone ready in case we need to. He trailed off as he heard a faint sound in the darkness. It was hard to hear it clearly from where I was, but I heard enough. It sounded almost like a baby crying. It sounded distant, but there was no mistaking it. It sounded exactly like a crying baby. Jason looked back at the others. By this point, Kathy and Tony, who just come in from the smoke break, had come over to investigate too. Is that a fucking baby? Tony asked quietly. What the hell is that? Jason didn't say a word. He just went right out to investigate, and Tony hesitated for a moment before following him. The two disappeared out onto the lot, wandering out toward the cars to follow the sound. Janet had come up behind me and was staring out the window. What's going on? She asked. There's a baby out there, at least it sounds like it. Her eyes narrowed behind her Coke bottle glasses. A baby? Like with a customer? I don't know. But who the hell would bring a baby out on a lot at this hour? I asked. Janet didn't answer. Her eyes were still narrowed. She finally turned away, heading downstairs to go and investigate. I didn't follow her. I saw her joining Reese, Sheena and Kathy in the showroom a few moments later with Terrence, and Andy wandering over to see what was going on as well. The six of them congregated near the window of the dealership, watching, and waiting to see what Jason and Tony would bring back. The smoke on the lot looked like it had mostly faded by this point, which was probably a good sign, but other than that all was quiet. Then the screaming began, faint and distant, but panicked. Even from the second floor balcony, I could clearly hear it. I paused and leaned against the balcony, watching as Tony sprinted in from the lot toward the door. I'd never seen anyone run that fast before. He reached the door, tearing it open and stumbling back into the dealership. He was hyperventilating, almost on the verge of crying. Something got Jason. He rasped, "There's something on the lot. There's something." I saw Terrence try to sit him up and ask for more information, but Tony was, well, he was hysterical. Not a lot of what he said was intelligible other than that Jason was gone. At one point, Terrence seemed to give up on him and looked over at Andy. "Can you call someone?" He asked, and Andy just gave a sort of clumsy nod before going for his phone. I watched him dial a number, but no one seemed to answer. He tried again several times before watching him start to get on my nerves, and I took out my own phone. There was no signal. "I can't get through." Andy said, "Phones are down." I saw Reese heading for one of the nearby cubicles and grabbing one of the landline phones. "It's out," he said. "What the fuck is going on here?" Guys. Sheena's panic screeching drew all eyes toward her. She was pointing out the window into the dimly lit car lot. "There's something out there, something behind the cars." Terrence stood up. "Where?" "At front row. I saw it moving between the cars. An animal or something." Terrence shuffled closer to the glass, staring out onto the lot, but there was nothing to see. Just cars under the LED light poles. "I don't see it," he said. A low thud echoed to the quiet dealership, coming from above us like something had just landed on the roof. All eyes turned upwards. The roof of the dealership was high above us, with metal trusses spanning horizontally across it for support and air ducts winding between them to keep the showroom cool. The actual roof was simple corrugated metal, sturdy, but when it rained you could hear it pounding on the roof. It was actually kind of calming. Something was up there now. We could hear its footsteps as it moved across the roof. "The hell is that?" Terrence asked softly. Tony had gone quiet, but even from the balcony I could see the look of complete and utter terror on his face. "Oh, God," he stammered. "Oh, God, oh, God." Terrence's brow furrowed. "What the fuck is this?" he asked. He looked over at Tony. "This some kind of joke?" "What?" Tony looked confused. "You and Jason, are you two putting on some kind of prank?" He asked. That's Jason on the roof, isn't it?" "No." Tony insisted, and judging by the tone of his voice, he was either completely serious or a fantastic liar. I wasn't entirely sure which myself. The footsteps continued to echo across the ceiling as whoever or whatever was up there walked across it. That wasn't Jason I saw outside. Sheena said, "There's something else out there." "Oh, yeah, sure, 'cause you're on it too." Terrence scoffed. "I don't believe this. We're in the middle of a sale here, and you're all fucking around playing games like a bunch of kids? We could have customers here. You really want to risk doing this in front of customer? You two both know better. This is not a fucking joke." "Yeah, sure. You really think I'm falling for this shit? 'Cause I'll tell you something, and I'm going to tell it to you right now. I did not fall off the goddamn wagon yesterday. Terry, I am not fucking around." Tony snapped, but Terrence ignored him and headed for the door. "Don't!" Tony warned, but Terrence wasn't listening. He stepped out onto the lot and looked back up toward the roof. "Jason, get the fuck down from there. Whatever this is, I'm not." His voice trailed off as he stared up at the roof, and I could see his brow furrowing as he saw something, although I wasn't sure what. His eyes narrowed, then widened as something dove down off the roof and landed on him. I could hear Terrence scream as the creature tackled him to the ground. God, that scream. Terror and pain all in one, and moments later it was drowned out by the shrieks of the others. Sheena was the loudest, screeching like a banshee as she stumbled away from the window. Her obnoxious fuck-me heels caused her to collapse back onto the ground. The thing on top of Terrace bit at him, although I could see him beneath it, struggling to fight it off. At a glance, it looked sort of like a large bird, although birds weren't usually 4 feet tall. This thing had to be around 4 to 5 feet tall, and it had a long feathered tail stretching out behind it. Its body was covered in sleek black feathers, like a crow's, although the tips of its wings were bright red. There was a blue crest of feathers atop its head, and its long tail was tipped with white. It had clamped its beak, no, jaws, around Terrence's arm. He was trying to fight it off, but the creature was too strong. I could see the arm and its jaws bending at an unnatural angle. It had snapped the bone clean in two, but he was still desperately trying to get free. The creature planted one clawed foot on his stomach, a foot tipped with an all-too-familiar sickle-shaped claw. That was when I realized I'd seen this creature before. Not in real life, but in the books and the toys my nephew liked. The thing that was killing Terrence was a fucking dinosaur. That was a goddamn raptor. The claw plunged into Terrence's stomach. He shrieked in pain as it ripped him open, and from between the cars on the lot, I could see 2 more identical creatures emerging from the darkness. There was a whole pack of them. One of them lunged for Terrence's head, closing it in its jaws. His screams grew louder. He desperately tried to struggle as the first raptor tore his arm off completely. Nobody helped Terrence. Nobody was that brave. We could only watch in horror as the raptors tore him apart. And looking back at that moment, I genuinely could not tell you when he stopped struggling. For a moment, we all stood in stunned silence trying to process the impossible we were looking at. Andy was hyperventilating. And for once I honestly didn't blame him for standing there, useless. He just watched his own father get torn apart by fucking raptors. What the hell was he supposed to do? Then one of the raptors looked up and stared through the window of the dealership at the horrified but motionless audience to their feast. Tony was the first to run, scrambling along the ground in a panic. The rest weren't so quick to move. Not until the raptor lunged, throwing itself against the glass. The window didn't break, but it shook violently. Andy took off next, mindlessly sprinting back toward his office. Reese went next. Tried to follow him, although Andy had closed and locked the door before he could get in. "Hey, H-E-Y, what the fuck?" Reese demanded, pounding on the glass beside the door. From my vantage point, I couldn't see what Andy said or did in response. Kathy was stepping back, away from the window. "See, that thing can't get through, right?" She asked. "I don't think so," Janet replied. Sheena was already on her feet again and scrambling away. "You really want to find out?" She snapped. Kathy seemed to take the hint and started to follow Sheena, but Janet still hesitated. The raptor stared at her through the glass, before backing off, retreating a few feet away before looking back at her again. Then it charged. Janet finally moved, scrambling away in a panic in the moment before the raptor threw itself through the glass. The window erupted. Kathy screamed. In her panic, she tripped over her own feet. Although to her credit, she didn't let that stop her and frantically dragged herself under one of the cars in the showroom. Reese and Sheena both took off in the direction of the stairs. The raptor ignored all of them. It only focused on Janet, who couldn't put enough distance between it and her in time. She tried to get away, but the raptor shook off the disorientation quickly and charged at her. She had only seconds to react before it took her down, and I could only hear her screams as it tore her apart. I heard movement behind me and looked over to see Tony stumbling up the stairs. Reese was right behind him. Come on, Tony snapped. And as soon as Reese was through the door, they both slammed it shut behind them. The moment it was closed, Tony pushed Janet's desk against it. Reese helped as soon as he realized what he was doing. Wait! I heard Sheena call from the stairwell on the other side of the door. Wait! She tried to open it, but by that point Reese and Tony had already blocked it. Tony hesitated. Hold on. He stammered and tried to pull the desk back to let her in, but Reese threw his weight against it, keeping the door blocked. What the hell are you doing? Tony snapped. The moment we let her in, those things are coming in too. Reese replied, if she wanted to make it up here, she shouldn't have worn those fucking heels. Janet's screams had gone silent. From the corner of my eye, I saw the other two raptors coming into the broken window. One of them looked up at me. The sight of it made my blood run cold. For Christ's sake, just let her in, I said, looking over at Reese. I rushed over to try and help Tony pull the desk back. I may not have liked Sheena, but I sure as hell didn't want her to die. Reese pushed me away, knocking me to the ground. You want to get fucking eaten, Abby? He snarled. Be my guest, but I'm not fucking dying with you. Please. Sheena sobbed from the other side of the door. Please. She tried desperately to open it. She pounded on it. Oh God. Oh God. Reese moved the fucking desk. Tony demanded. He tried to pull again, but Reese forced him back. I'm not letting them up here. No. Reese, please, Sheena begged. I don't want to. Please. Oh God. Reese, please. The terror in her voice told me everything I needed to know. Sheena wasn't alone in that stairwell anymore. Reese, please, Dash. Her panic cries turned into an anguished shriek. I could hear the struggle on the other side of the door as Sheena was dragged down the stairs, sobbing and screaming. My hands pressed my mouth in quiet horror as we listened to Sheena's death, every ugly detail of it. Reese just stood there in silence, closed his eyes as if that might block it all out, and Tony just glared daggers at him the entire time. He lunged for Reese, grabbing him by the shirt and pinning him to the wall. What the fuck is wrong with you? He hissed. I just saved our lives, Reese replied, although there was a tremor in his voice. Tony just grimaced in rage. I should throw you over the fucking balcony, he said, and Reese had no response to that. He looked over at me as if I might take his side, but I just avoided eye contact with him. As far as I was concerned, he just murdered Sheena. I could hear the sound of shattering glass on the first floor, followed by Andy's shrieks as the raptors broke into his office. My entire body tensed up as I listened to them ripping him apart. My breathing had gotten heavier. I didn't remember the last time I'd been so fucking scared. 5 minutes ago, there had been 9 of us in this dealership. Now there were only 3, no, 4. I remembered how Kathy had crawled under one of the cars. Was she still there? Could we get to her? I crept back over toward the balcony and peeked over, careful not to let the raptors see me. I could see 2 of them, both of them next to Andy's office, nowhere near the car Kathy had hidden under. As far as I could tell, she was still down there. I wanted to call out to her, but thought better of it. I didn't want to risk those things hearing me. One of the raptors wandered away from Andy's office, while the other one climbed back into the window. The wandering raptor sniffed at the air before making its way toward the car Kathy was under. I saw it open its mouth, but the sound that came out made my stomach drop. It sounded like a man speaking. All clear. The raptor looked around. All clear. The voice almost sounded perfectly human. The pitch was a little off, but if I hadn't seen it come from the fucking raptor, I would have thought it was a person. All clear. It called again, and from the stairwell, I heard a different voice. Sheena's voice. Reese. Tony and Reese looked over toward the door. Reese, please. What the fuck? Reese asked, but Tony kept him pinned to the wall. Don't, he said. Don't touch that door, it's not her. Reese, please. All clear, called the voice from the showroom. Tony and I exchanged a look. He finally let Reese go and crept closer to me, looking over the balcony to watch as the raptor patrolling the showroom spoke in a man's voice. It was standing a few feet away from the car Kathy was under now, and the other raptor had come out of Andy's office and was stalking toward the car as well. They knew where she was. I had to think fast. I had to think of a way to save her. I glanced over toward my desk. There was a whole punch sitting within arm's reach. I grabbed it and without thinking hurled it as far as I could. It hit one of the cars in the showroom, bouncing off the hood and landing on the ground with a clatter. Both raptors looked over in that direction. They sniffed the air, but only one of them moved to investigate. The other stayed right beside the car, lowering its head to sniff at the ground, before snarling. I could hear Kathy sobbing as the raptor forced its head underneath the car, and her sobs turned to screams. It ripped her out from underneath the vehicle. She thrashed and screamed. She almost got away once or twice. But the moment the second raptor came back, it was over, and by the time the third had left the stairwell to join in, there was no saving her. Tears streamed down my cheeks as Kathy was torn apart, screaming just like the others. I wanted to save her. I wanted to stop this. But I couldn't. This whole thing felt like a nightmare. None of it made any sense. I didn't understand how or why this was happening. None of this made any sense. Kathy's dying screams had drawn Reese over. He looked over the balcony and grimaced before ducking down beside us. Tony glared daggers at him, but didn't say much else. Instead, his attention shifted toward the door to the nearby boardroom. He nodded his head toward it, and the message was clear. We'd be safer there. He put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to go first. I started to go, but Reese cut me off, grabbing my desk to pick himself up. Quietly, Tony warned, although it didn't make much of a difference. Something crashed against the wall behind me. Reese spun around, and I saw his eyes bulge with terror as one of the raptors lifted itself up onto the balcony. It must have used one of the cars to get up there. F-U-Z dash. The raptor lunged before Reese could finish that sentence, tackling him to the ground. Its hooked claws buried themselves in his stomach as its jaws snapped shut around his head. He shrieked in agony, but to be honest, I can't say I cared that much about his suffering. Tony and I moved, bolting as fast as we could toward the boardroom. From the corner of my eye, I saw a second raptor climbing over the balcony, and I waited for the feeling of their claws and teeth digging into my body, but it never came. Tony and I stumbled into the boardroom, and he slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind us, pinning his body against it as the raptors tried to force their way in, this time without luck. Help me block it, Tony said, and I wasted no time in grabbing whatever I could. The table was too heavy to move, but there was a storage closet we used for records and office supplies. There were a few heavy boxes in there I was able to stack up by the door to keep it from opening. The raptors pushed against the door, but the boxes held it shut. Tony still lingered close to it, terrified that it was still going to open somehow. Outside, Reese had gone silent. Not that I missed him. I could hear movement, something sniffing around. Then I heard a voice. All clear. A pause before the raptor tried again. All clear. Then silence. Tony squeezed his eyes shut before looking around as if he could find a way out of this. His eyes settled on the boardroom windows. They looked out over the showroom, and I could see the gears in his head turning. He reached into his pocket, fumbling around with something before grabbing a pair of car keys. They were from our inventory, and he stared at the tag on them for a moment before giving a nod. A121, he said under his breath. A 121. That was AQ7 in our showroom. It was an SUV. I'd seen Tony showing it off to a customer a little while ago. Tony moved over toward the window. Sure enough, it was right there. Not exactly right beneath us, but close enough. He seemed to think it over for a moment, doing the math in his head before nodding. Okay, he said. Okay? He looked over at me. We're getting out of here, he said. See that Q7 down there? It's got a sunroof. If I break this window, I think I can climb out and use the trusses on the roof to get to it. Then all I need to do is drop down, and I should be able to get inside before they get to me. I'm sorry, you want to go back to the showroom? I asked. We need to get the fuck out of here. Tony replied, we can't call for help. Everyone else is dead. No one is coming. Not until the morning, at least. Do you really want to take your chances? I wasn't entirely sure. Tony took a few other sets of keys out of his pocket. I can hit the alarm on a few cars out on the lot. That should draw them away, he said. I'll break the window, hit the alarms, and then go for it. Once I make it to the car, you can follow me. I'll open the sunroof. It'll be easier for you to get in. I just shook my head. No, I'm not going out there. The moment you get to the car, they're going to be right on top of you. You open the sunroof and you're dead. Well, I'm not just going to fucking leave you here. Tony said, you really want to stay behind, Abby? I didn't. But between that and staying in the showroom, I knew which choice was better. I looked over at the closet. I'd emptied out. There was a little bit of room in there now. Enough for me to fit. The door was metal. The raptors probably wouldn't be able to break through. There, I said, if you want to try and get help, I'll be in there. Tony didn't like it, but he didn't argue. He smoothed down his hair and sighed. Fine, he said. I'll be back as soon as I can, okay? I nodded. He put a reassuring hand on my shoulder before heading back to window. I saw him hit the button to unlock the SUV. Then he picked up one of the chairs by the conference table and threw it clean through the window. It shattered on impact, and the chair crashed down to the ground below. I could hear movement as the raptors went down to investigate. While they did, Tony took one of the other sets of keys out of his pocket and hit the car alarm. Out on the lot, one of the car horns went off, blaring out into the night. It would have been a great way to call for help if there were any other buildings around us. Through the window, I saw two of the raptors going out through a broken window to investigate. Gotcha, he said under his breath. He gave me one last look, silently making a promise. He was going to come back for me. Then I saw the movement through the window behind him, a shape climbing on one of the trusses on the bottom of the roof, one of the raptors. I didn't get a chance to scream, but the look on my face must have given everything away. Tony looked back to see his death clinging on to the truss just outside of the window. It looked back at him before leaping. It landed on the edge of the window and started to pull itself in. Tony let out a startled cry and stumbled back a step as the raptor lifted itself into the conference room. He grabbed one of the chairs to throw at it, but by the time he picked it up, the raptor was already inside and closing in on him. I heard him scream, but I didn't watch. I just bolted for the storage closet and pulled the door closed behind me. I gripped the doorknob tight, hoping to whatever god might be listening that they wouldn't be able to open it. Tony screamed behind me, and in the darkness of the closet, his dying screams were the only thing I had. But when the silence finally came, it honestly felt a little worse. I could hear the raptor outside. I could hear it sniffing around the closet. It knew where I was. It pushed against the door, and I couldn't stop myself from letting out a strangled sob. The raptor chirped. I could imagine it standing just outside, head tilted as it tried to figure out how to get to me. I could hear movement as another raptor came into the window. Then I heard a voice. Please. Sheena's dying cries. Reese, please. When that got no response, they tried another noise. I could hear the sound of a baby crying. A perfect imitation of a baby's cry. And when that got no response, they tried more. No. Please, no. I heard Andy say, please, no. Please, no. All clear, said an unfamiliar man's voice. At one point, I heard the sound of a fire alarm. The raptors gently nudged the door. I felt one of them trying to move the doorknob and gripped it tighter, although they couldn't seem to get a solid grip on the smooth metal knob. And when they finally gave up, I felt no reassurance. I knew they were still there. For what felt like hours, we sat in silence, waiting to see who would break first, me or them. They sat patiently outside the door, the only evidence of their presence being their soft breathing. I cried, knowing deep in my heart that I wasn't going to leave this closet. They had me. This was just delaying the inevitable. Then, Finally, there was another noise. The raptors were moving. I don't know how much time had passed, but they were moving again. I heard them going out through the window, or at least I thought I did. How could I be sure that wasn't fake out, or just another sound they were making? I kept the door closed even as I heard the two of them drop to the ground below. Even as the true silence sank in, I kept the door closed and I held it closed. That was the only reason I survived. All clear. That voice pulled me out of the doze I'd been slipping into. My hand was still on the doorknob and my grip tightened. I could hear movement outside. I could hear human voices. "We've got another casualty," a man said. "Anyone else?" "I don't know." "Check the closet." I felt something trying to open the door. I held it fast. A panic whimper escaped me. "Hold up, the door won't open." They tried it again. "I think there's someone inside." "Hello? Hello, can you hear me? This is Officer Peyton Charles with the Edmonton Police. Is someone in there?" I didn't answer. It could have been them. It could have been them. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I didn't open the door. They had to take it off its hinges to get to me. And it was only then that I knew that this was real and I was safe. Addendum by Dr. Lana Bloom. The account goes on for a paragraph or so with some tedious epilogue from poor Abby about how she knows what really happened that night, and yada yada yada. It's really not relevant to my notes, so I'll omit it. While I am slightly disappointed that there was one survivor from the test, I can't deny that an eyewitness testimony of the first field test of the Pavaraptor is extremely useful. I now have a better idea on exactly how they perform in the field, and to be honest, they've exceeded most of my expectations. The vocal mimicry continues to be my favorite trait of the species, and appears to be working more or less as expected. I suppose I would like to see them implement a wider variety of sounds, but I also think that will come with time and exposure to new stimuli. Considering the fact that most of the population of the targeted area was eliminated within minutes of the initial attack, and the rest were picked off quickly afterwards, I don't think it's that important. On the subject of the survivor, I don't think I'll do any follow-up with Abby McKinnon. Anyone who's able to survive my work deserves to live, and frankly, I figure I put her through enough. I am a little frustrated that hiding in a closet was enough to evade them, but identifying these issues is why we run tests, and ultimately I am satisfied with this outcome. Let's see those pricks sell me a fucking lemon now. Story 4. Someone's paying me a lot to guard an empty field. The past 6 months have been hell. I lost my job, which made my girlfriend leave me too. For months, I couldn't find anything, and when I finally did, it was just a gas station gig. A few days later, my mom died in a car accident. That broke me completely, and I got fired from the gas station too. By then, I had been unemployed for nearly half a year. I was completely broke. I had almost no savings left, and I spent the last of it on paying rent. After that, I had no idea what to do. There was no one I could borrow money from. My mom had been the only one I could turn to. My dad left us when I was a kid, and I had no idea where he even was. I absolutely had to find work, but back then, unemployment was skyrocketing. Everyone was looking for a job. My situation felt hopeless. That's when I came across a listing on a job site, and it instantly caught my attention. Dash 24/7 shift work, immediate start. The only requirement was a valid driver's license. The pay? Suspiciously high. But what did I have to lose? If I didn't find a job soon, I'd end up on the street anyway. The ad only listed a phone number. Applicants were supposed to call it. I didn't overthink it. I just called. But after a minute of ringing, they hung up on me. I figured, whatever. Probably 1,000 people applied anyway. Another dead end. But just as I put my phone down, I got a text from the number I'd called. It read, "We can only communicate in writing. It's more convenient for us." I didn't care, as long as they hired me. They could use smoke signals for all I cared. They asked me to briefly write who I was and why I applied, so I told them the truth. Soon enough, They replied that I was a good fit. They asked when I could start. It all felt suspicious as hell. But I didn't give a damn anymore. I had literally nothing to lose. I accepted the job. Then they texted me a GPS coordinate and told me to be there at exactly 8 a.m. the next morning. The location was a train station parking lot not far from where I lived. Two thoughts immediately crossed my mind. Either they were going to harvest my organs, or I just walked into some kind of pyramid scheme. Still, as sketchy as it all sounded, I was there by 8 the next morning. I had no idea what or who I was supposed to look for. That's when a pudgy, bald, middle-aged guy walked up to me. He looked like a school janitor or something. Then he said, "You Steve?" I just nodded. Yeah, I was the guy who applied for the job. The chubby man led me to the parking lot, where an ancient Dodge Caravan was parked. I could barely believe my eyes when he told me this would be my work vehicle. My grandpa used to drive something like this when I was a kid. He opened the trunk and pulled out a cardboard box. He said everything I'd need was in there. Then he handed me a few papers to sign. I skimmed them quickly, just the usual stuff about labor laws and my contract. The bald guy wished me good luck, then handed me $1,000 in cash. I froze. Why was I being paid so much up front? He said it was a sign of trust and that I'd get the rest of my pay when I returned. If I had any questions or problems, I should text the same number I applied through. Then he gave me the keys and just walked away. I opened the box and started loading the stuff into the car. It had everything. A security guard uniform, a flashlight, a ton of pre-packaged sandwiches, and 2 large bottles of water. There was also a small manual labeled User Manual. The first page had a short list of rules. You must wear the uniform at all times during a 24-hour shift. Your pay is only granted if you stay on site for the full 24 hours. I didn't read much more than that at first. I flipped ahead to the page that said where I was supposed to go. It was another GPS coordinate. I punched it into my phone to see where it led. It pointed to a seemingly empty field just outside of town. Weird, but if that's what they wanted, fine. I'd already been paid part of the money anyway. The drive was pretty uneventful. I punched the coordinates into my GPS. It was easy enough to follow the directions. The trip took about an hour and a half. Once I got off the highway, I passed through a small town, one of those typical, quiet places. From there, it was just another 10 minutes down a narrow road. And then the GPS told me to turn onto a small dirt path leading into the woods. There were tire tracks in the soil, so clearly others had driven there before. I figured it was safe enough and drove in. The trees were dense, and their branches scraped against the sides of the car as I made my way through. Then suddenly, I emerged from the forest. A wide, empty lot opened up in front of me. My phone beeped. You have arrived at your destination. It really was just an empty field. No trees grew here, or maybe they'd been cleared out. The grass was dry and yellow, like it hadn't rained in ages, and clearly no one had watered it either. I had no idea what I was supposed to be guarding out here in the middle of nowhere, but fine, what else did I going on? Then I remembered the manual's note. I was only allowed to work in a provided uniform, so I got out of the car and changed. I looked like some awkward mall cop reject. Just then my phone buzzed. Another text from that same number. Welcome to the company. Good luck on your first shift. Your 24 hours have officially begun. Time passed slowly. At first, I just sat in the car, unsure of what I was supposed to do. I ate one of the sandwiches. By the afternoon, I got tired of sitting and decided to take a walk around the field to see what I was even guarding, but I didn't find anything. It was just an empty lot. No fence, no buildings. The tree line roughly marked the boundary of the area. Some of the trees had signs posted on them. Private property and no trespassing. I got hungry again, so I went back to the car and ate another sandwich. Then I waited some more. That's when I remembered the manual. Maybe there was more about what I was supposed to be doing. I flipped through it and read the next set of instructions. No one is allowed on the property. If anyone enters, politely ask them to leave. No audio or video recordings may be made on the premises. Do not fall asleep during your shift. Perform your duties diligently. Do not leave the property unless specifically instructed to do so, or you will not be paid. If you find a package on the premises, place it in the trunk and bring it to the rendezvous point. That part really made me pause. What kind of package would show up here? Drop from a plane, maybe? I started getting nervous, thinking maybe I'd gotten myself into something illegal. But then again, why would they make me sign an employment contract? The mafia doesn't really do paperwork. I laughed at myself at the idea, then flipped ahead in the manual. There were no more general instructions, so I kept reading. A few pages later, the booklet laid out a time-based schedule with specific tasks. But even the first one struck me as strange. 045, please feed the dog. What dog? Was this some kind of cover story, like in the movies where they use code names for things? Or was there actually a dog out here somewhere? Whatever the case, I had already missed the time. I let it go. 222. Please drive the metal rod into the ground at the northwest corner of the lot. Metal rod? I hadn't seen anything like that. Maybe I missed it. 430. Please remove the metal rod. Place it back where you found it. 841. Please politely ask the boy on the bicycle to leave. I arrived after those times, so I didn't pay attention to them. 1610. For your own safety, please remain inside the provided vehicle until 1630. That one made my stomach drop. I checked my phone. It was 1601. I stared out the windshield, counting down the seconds in dread. 16 hours, 9 minutes and 57 seconds, 16 hours, 9 minutes and 58 seconds, 16 hours, 9 minutes and 59 seconds, 16 hours and 10 minutes. And suddenly the air around me felt heavier. Still, nothing happened. The field remained exactly the same. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. It was still just a mild May Wednesday, but I didn't dare move. I stayed curled up in the car until 16:30 on the dot. The only thing I saw was a magpie taking off in the field. Nothing out of the ordinary. At 16:30, I finally got out and walked around the lot. Still the same. Just like when I'd arrived around 10 in the morning. I was getting seriously anxious now. What the hell was this job? It felt like some messed up game show. I half expected to find myself on YouTube the next day as about some elaborate prank. I climbed back into the car and flipped open the manual again. After that, I had to know what else was in there. Among the instructions, only one remained. If you're lacking anything, please inform us via the contact number. So I decided to keep reading the rest of the day's schedule. See what I still needed to be aware of. 1800 hours. When the vehicle arrives, please indicate whether you followed today's instructions. If you did, raise your right hand high enough to be visible. If you didn't, please raise your left hand. I let out a long sigh. Another meaningless task. What vehicle? Why do I need a signal whether I followed their weird little rules? And what happens if I raise the left hand? At exactly 1800 hours, a vehicle showed up. It didn't come out onto the field. A black pickup. 2 people were inside, but they were too far to make out. I stood next to my own car, watching them, wondering when I was supposed to signal. Then the pickup gave a short honk, as if to say, we're waiting. I quickly raised my right hand high. The truck pulled forward a little, but it never came closer. It turned around the edge of the lot, then drove right back down the narrow dirt road, the same way I came in. I scratched my head, baffled. What the hell was this job? All I had to do was watch over an empty field and obey these ridiculous instructions. I laid the manual down on the car's hood again and flipped to the next task. 2233. If you see someone on the field, please politely ask them to leave. Except if it's the old man. Leave him alone. He will leave on his own by 2300 hours. Yeah, I wasn't thrilled about this one. Chasing strangers off a dark field in the middle of the night? What the hell was going on here? The rest of my afternoon passed calmly. I sat on the field, went for a walk, or rested in the car. There was something weirdly peaceful about the place. So naturally calm. If it weren't for those absurd tasks, I might have even enjoyed it. But my stomach twisted whenever I thought about spending the entire night out here. I checked the schedule to see what else awaited me. After the 2233 task, the next one wasn't until 540, which simply said, let the deer cross the field. That finally gave me some comfort. At least it sounded normal. As evening came, the temperature started to drop, and I figured it'd be best to stay in the car. I was scrolling on my phone. Well, more like browsing job listings. No matter how well they promised to pay for this. If they even paid the rest, I didn't want to do this day longer than I had to. With no better idea, I started watching a movie on my phone. I know I broke a rule, but I ended up dozing off. Not for long, maybe half an hour, and I hoped nobody had noticed. If anyone was even watching me, then I checked the time, 10:35 p.m. Shit, I had to check if someone was on the field. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the car, nervous. I swept the beam across the field. Nothing, still empty like always. Or, so I thought, a bit farther off, near the trees, someone was there. A young woman in a red dress with white spots. She was having a picnic. There was a red checker blanket laid out, a picnic basket, a bottle of wine, and some snacks. I had zero desire to walk over. Who the hell picnics at almost 11 p.m. in the middle of nowhere? And how the hell did she get here? I swallowed hard to summon the courage. No way I was risking my payment after enduring the whole damn day. I braced myself and walked over slowly, trying to hide how freaked out I was. The woman was sitting there, cheerful and smiling with a lovely face, struggling to open the wine. She hadn't even noticed me. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm afraid you can't be here. This is private property," I said politely, though my voice trembled from my nerves. "Oh my God, you scared me," she squealed. "I didn't even see you there." She seemed totally normal, like it was a sunny Saturday morning and she was just relaxing in the park. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," I repeated, still politely. "Oh, I didn't know," she said with mild surprise. "But wouldn't you like to join me for the picnic instead?" I glanced around, confused and tense. What the hell is this now? But the guide had been clear. I had to ask her to leave, so I stuck to the plan. "I'm afraid I can't, ma'am," I replied with a slightly trembling voice. "You can't picnic here. Please leave." "All right," she said softly, "but could you help me up?" She gently extended her hand for assistance. I took her small, slender hand. It was warm and soft, like she'd been lounging on a beach, not sitting in a damp forest. I helped her up, and she began brushing off her dress, straightening it delicately. "Would you mind packing up the picnic basket for me?" she asked with a sweet smile. I didn't answer, just nodded anxiously. Anything to get her gone. I bent down to fold the red blanket and grabbed the wine bottle, and I took my eyes off her for just a second. But when I looked up, she was gone, like she'd never existed at all. I panicked. Sweat poured down my back. My throat tightened like I'd swallowed a stone. There was no sign of her, no movement, no sound, nowhere to hide, yet she had simply vanished. Without saying a word, I walked back to the car. I got in, started up, and turned on every light I could. I stared out the windshield, barely moving, for what felt like hours, until dawn finally broke. That's when I saw a herd of deer emerging from the woods, slowly crossing the field. One of them stopped, stared at my car for a moment, then followed the rest. I was getting really tired, but there wasn't much time left in my shift. I didn't get out of the car until the sky was fully lit. There were no more tasks listed in the handbook for Thursday, so I could finally relax. I walked to the spot on the field where the woman had been picnicking the night before, but there was no trace of her. No blanket, no basket, nothing. Instead, there was a small box, a tiny wooden crate, carefully sealed, with a red ribbon tied around it. 2 stickers were on the front. One read fragile. The other, oddly, said do not open until 13 hours 78 minutes. I didn't even bat an eye at that. Just another strange thing in a string of strange things. I remembered the instructions, so I picked it up and placed it on the back seat of the car. I waited a few more hours. The day grew warmer. The sun lit up the entire field, peaceful and serene. It felt like I was just camping out in nature. At last, 10 o'clock came. Soon after, I received a text. "Thank you for your service. Your shift is now over." Please return to the rendezvous point. Attached was a GPS coordinate back to the train station where I'd first met the chubby man. The drive back was rough. I stopped in the small town for food and coffee to keep myself awake. I had eggs and bacon, my first hot meal after a bizarre 24 hours. It felt surprisingly good to leave that strange yet peaceful place behind. When I arrived at the station, the same man was already there, looking just as tired and dull as before. What the hell is going on at that place? I asked as I handed him the keys. I don't even know where you were, he said flatly and just shrugged. But here's your envelope. They said there's a little bonus in there since you followed all the instructions. Who said that? I asked immediately. The company. I don't know, man. I just go where they tell me. They pay great, and that's all I care about. I didn't know what to say. He was just another worker like me, just in a different role. Go home. Get some sleep? The man added as he got into his car. If they gave you a bonus already, they'll probably call you again. And with that, he drove off. I stood there, not sure if I dreamed the past day or not. I went home, finally took a shower, and after more than 24 hours awake, I crashed hard. But before I slept, I opened the envelope. For one day of work, they paid me $5,000, plus the $1,000 I got up front. I think I'll go back. I took 2 days off. Finally, with that money, I paid off all my debts and could finally sleep in peace. But I still didn't have a proper job. I applied to quite a few normal positions, but it was like no one needed me anywhere. Even my neighbor lost his job. Things were rough in the city, that's for sure. The news kept saying the crisis was inevitable. Factories were shutting down. People were getting laid off. That evening, my phone buzzed again. It was that number, the familiar one. Steve, there's another shift available tomorrow. Interested? I hesitated. That place was strange. I was wary of it, but something about it pulled me back. That kind of money, just for following some rules and paying attention to weird tasks? I said yes. Once again, I was at the train station at 8 a.m. The car showed up, same brown Dodge Caravan as last time, and the same fat guy was driving it. He looked cheerful this time, already grinning at me knowingly. Told you you'd be back, Steve, the fat guy said with a smug grin. Good pay, right? I gave him an awkward smile and nodded. Same setup as before. He handed me the $1,000 up front, a cardboard box with my gear, and a day's instructions. Then I took the keys and drove out of the city. The coordinates led to the same place again, through the small town, into the woods, and finally to the field. I parked in the same corner of the property, where I could keep a good eye on everything. But this time, I figured I'd read the manual ahead of time. Didn't want to get caught off guard like before. The handbook was identical to the one I had last time, with just one difference. Instead of Wednesday, it now said Saturday on the cover. The rules were the same as last time, but the schedule? Completely different. 451, do not worry about the horses. They're just grazing. You may approach them if you'd like. Missed that one again. 11:29, a bird must be seen flying high. If you don't see it, immediately text the contact number and leave the premises. 13:34, please put on a raincoat provided in the box and do not re-enter the vehicle until the rain has stopped. When done, place the raincoat in the trunk. 15:46, let the hikers pass. Greet them back if they greet you. 19 hours, 91 minutes. Do not die. What? I froze in disbelief. What kind of time is 19 hours, 91 minutes? And what the hell does do not die mean? I'd already been creeped out by this place, but no one said I could die doing this job. I still had 10 minutes left to spot the bird. I was sitting closer to the center of the field. The sun was shining down on me. Soft clouds crawling across the sky. Everything felt peaceful and calm. I texted the contact number. What's 19 hours, 91 minutes supposed to mean? And what do you mean, don't die? I'll quit right now if this is some dangerous shit. They replied quickly, assuring me it was just a typo, that this job wouldn't cost me my life. Just follow the tasks, and everything would be fine. I wasn't reassured, but $5,000 for a day's work? That was reassuring. So I swallowed my nerves and decided that if anything got too weird, I'd just leave. I sat in silence, listening to the wind whistle through the trees. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I felt like I could stay here forever, if not for the bizarre tasks. I kept watching the sky, waiting for the bird. None in sight. By 11:30, still nothing. I was starting to panic. How long was I supposed to wait? I was just reaching for my phone again when I finally spotted it. A large bird was circling high above, like it was waiting for something. Relief flooded through me. At least that box was checked. I had a couple of hours until the raincoat thing, so I decided to take a walk. It was nice out, and I needed to stretch my legs. The air was fresh, and I felt more prepared this time. I had snacks, drinks, even brought coffee and soda. After a while, I relieved myself behind a tree, no one around after all, then sat down to eat. At around 13:30, the sky began to darken. I'd already pulled out the bright yellow raincoat from the box and stood beside the car, waiting. At exactly 13:34, rain began to pour down in sheets. There were clouds, sure, but not the kind that should cause a downpour like this. Something felt off. Rain drummed against the plastic hood of my coat. Every part of me wanted to run to the car, but the rules were clear. I wasn't risking it. And this rain, it felt salty, almost like seawater. But we were nowhere near the ocean. Then I noticed something strange. Toward the center of the field, there was a large patch where no rain was falling. Everywhere else it poured, but in that one square-shaped section, not a single drop. I made my way there slowly, boots sucking into the thick, muddy earth. I stepped into the center of the dry square and looked up. Nothing above me. No covering. No drone. No dome. Nothing. But not a single drop touched me. All around, a storm raged. Inside that square, absolute calm. When the rain finally stopped, I trudged back to the car and placed the raincoat in the trunk, just like they asked. Until 15:46, I mostly relaxed again, watching a show on my phone. It was actually kind of comfortable in a weird way. That's when I noticed something from the corner of my eye. Two people were walking past my car, both dressed in full hazmat suits, each carrying a large bag. They moved across the field like they knew exactly where they were going. One of them stopped in front of my car and waved. I waved back. Were these the hikers I was supposed to greet? The two figures continued toward the center of the field. I stepped out of the car and kept watching. They walked the entire field perimeter, stopping briefly at each corner to examine something. They seemed to be talking to each other, but I was too far to hear. Then, like they finished some task, they calmly walked into the woods and vanished between the trees. I figured it was best not to follow them. Easier to pretend this was all perfectly normal. But now, 1900 hours was drawing dangerously close. At exactly 1900 hours, the clock changed. I sat uncomfortably in the car, tense from that strange line in the manual. The closer it got to nightfall, the less I wanted to be here on the supposedly peaceful field. My legs bounced anxiously, and I leaned on the steering wheel, staring out at the open land. 15 minutes passed. Nothing happened. The field was as quiet and still as ever. I figured I might as well check what else was on the list for today. There were more entries after that do not die line, which I'd kind of given up on reading earlier. 2141. If someone is on the property, politely ask them to leave. 037. Important. If the man in the rabbit mask is alone, immediately tell him he must leave the premises. He is not allowed to stay even one more minute. If the man in the rabbit mask is with someone, do not approach them, but ask them to leave politely from a distance. Do not follow them under any circumstances. 232. If a man is running in circles, ask him to leave. 617. Leave the geese alone. They will depart shortly on their own. I rubbed my eyes, frustrated and nervous. Once again, the most disturbing tasks were saved for night. Then my phone buzzed. A text from the usual number. Please lock your car doors and do not let anyone in. This is important. My blood turned cold. What now? Without hesitation, I locked the car from inside. Whatever came next, I was not opening that door. That's when I saw someone running across the field in the fading light. They were sprinting from the forest straight toward my car, stumbling, constantly glancing back like they were being chased. As they got closer, I realized it was one of the hikers I'd seen earlier that day. His hazmat suit and gas mask were torn and bloody. He ran up to my car and started pounding on the door, screaming, "Open up, please, open the door." I didn't move, frozen. I just sat there, unsure what to do. The man grew more frantic, desperately yanking at the door handle, shouting through the mask. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Just gone. One moment screaming, the next emptiness. No trace. I sat motionless, stunned. Minutes passed. Felt like hours. My phone buzzed again. "Thank you, Stephen, for following our instructions. You've done a great service to the company. Your perseverance will not go unrewarded." My hands trembled as I texted back. "Did that man just die?" A reply came instantly. "No, that man is doing the job he was hired to do." I didn't write back. I locked myself inside the car again. Just like last time, I sat in the car, still drowsy. My hands rested on the steering wheel, and I was ready, so ready, to drive off the moment I sensed anything even slightly off. That's when I noticed the time on my watch. It was 21:41. I was supposed to check the field to see if anyone was there. Every part of me resisted the idea of getting out, but something pulled me, and maybe it wasn't just the money anymore. I stepped out of the car, but left the headlights on, just in case. That's when I saw it. Someone was already out there, another figure. He was sitting on a small wooden bench, an old man, just like the woman the other night. He didn't seem to notice me at first, not until I got closer. "Good evening, sir," I said gently. "I'm afraid you can't be here. I have to ask you to leave the property." The old man flinched and turned toward me with a sleepy, confused look. "Oh, you startled me. I didn't even see you coming." "Sorry, sir," I repeated calmly, "but you're not allowed to stay here. Please, I have to ask you to leave." He looked around in panic, as if he wasn't sure where he was. "Oh, I'm sorry," he muttered nervously. "I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be here. But where exactly am I?" I shook my head slightly. I didn't really know either. Doesn't matter," the old man mumbled, then added, "But could you give me a hand, son? Help me up, would you?" He reached out. I took his bony, wrinkled hand, just like the woman's hand days ago. It was warm and soft, as if it hadn't been sitting in the middle of a damp, cold field. There was something comforting about it, familiar. He stood up with a groan, rubbing his back, wincing. "Let me tell you something, son," the old man said once he straightened up. "Trust your instincts. Don't be afraid. You'll be fine." Then he froze, his gaze fixed over my shoulder, as if he saw something behind me. I turned in a panic, but it was only the dark forest. When I looked back, he was gone, just like that. Only the old wooden bench remained. I trudged back to the car, my mind replaying the old man's words over and over. I sat inside and stared at the starry sky, watching the clouds drift quietly across the night. Somehow, the old man had left me with a strange sense of calm. I was still scared, but I no longer felt like I was in real danger. Like this wasn't my danger to face. Not here. Not now. Time passed quicker, too. It was only when the clock hit 0:35 that I snapped out of it. 2 minutes left until the next task, and my stomach tightened into a knot again. After a few 10 seconds of scanning the field, I finally saw him, or maybe he had just appeared. A man stood in the middle of the field, wearing a tuxedo. On his head, a bright white rabbit mask with a cheerful grin. He was alone, perfectly still. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. My flashlight shook in my hand from nerves. I kept the beam trained on him the whole time as I approached. The rabbit-masked man didn't move. He stared directly into the light, unflinching. I stopped a few paces away. Something about him made my skin crawl. "Excuse me, sir," I called out, voice unsteady. "You're not allowed here. I need to ask you to leave the property." He didn't respond, just stood there unmoving, his face completely hidden by the mask. His tuxedo was muddy and stained, like he'd been sleeping in the dirt all day. "Sir," I tried again. "Please leave. You can't be here." He tilted his head slightly, like he was confused. Then, without warning, he took one step toward me. I flinched hard. Part of me wanted to run straight back to the car and leave this entire nightmare behind. "Sir," I repeated, trying to sound firm, "you really need to leave. Now." But the rabbit-masked man just stood there, still, gazing into my flashlight beam. He wasn't responding, not even reacting. What was I supposed to do? The others had always complied, eventually, but this one didn't even seem to understand what I was saying. We just stood there, staring at each other. I started thinking back to the manual. It said to ask politely. Politely? And this guy was wearing a tuxedo. Maybe I hadn't been respectful enough? "Dear sir," I tried again, putting on my most courteous tone. "Please allow me to kindly ask you to leave the premises. I'm afraid you're not permitted to be here." And just like that, he moved, without walking, without a word. He slowly raised one arm and waved at me, a small, parting wave. Then he turned around and began walking across the field, toward the trees. I kept a flashlight on him the whole time, tracking his unsteady steps. But then, he stopped at the forest edge. He turned to face me again, and waved once more. This time, it wasn't goodbye. This time, he was beckoning. He wanted me to follow him. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to follow that thing anywhere. Something about the way he moved, his legs bending the wrong way, his steps unsure and twisted, made my stomach churn. He kept beckoning, but I just shook my head. No. He lowered his arm, almost sadly, then walked into the forest and vanished among the trees. I was relieved, terrified but relieved, though somehow it unsettled me even more that he hadn't disappeared like the others. He had simply walked away, limped away, like something real. I returned to the car and climbed inside. Then I locked the doors, just in case. I checked the time, waiting for the next scheduled event at 2:32 a.m. The man who would be running in circles. But time was crawling. I checked the clock every few minutes, but it felt like hours. Still over an hour to go. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, eyes heavy again, as the weight of everything slowly dragged me down into exhaustion. I must have dozed off again, because I jolted awake in a panic. Only 20 minutes had passed, but something was off. The headlights were off, even though I'd left them on after the rabbit-masked man left. Dead battery? I flipped the lights off and then back on. They came on instantly, and my heart nearly stopped. The rabbit-masked man was standing a few meters in front of the car, staring directly at me. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman in a long, elegant white evening gown. She wore a black rabbit mask, a mirror to the man's white one. Her face was completely obscured. Only her long, curly blonde hair blew gently in the breeze. I was terrified. How long had they been standing there? What did they want from me? I'd already sent the man away once. Why had he come back? Should I try again? I forced myself to move, took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, but didn't move an inch away from the door. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I pointed it at them. "I already asked you to leave once," I said, voice shaky. "I have to ask again. Please leave the property." They didn't move, just stood there, staring into the beam of the headlights. Panic crawled up my spine. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Still keeping my eyes locked on the two figures, I pulled it out. A text message from the usual number. Warning: the rabbit-masked individuals are not supposed to be there. Leave the area immediately. I didn't wait a second longer. I jumped back into the car. That's when I heard the scream. A sound I couldn't place, like a hawk shrieking as it dives for prey, but sharper, worse. Then I saw the man in the tuxedo drop to all fours and charge, moving far faster than he had before, like a spider, scuttling with unnatural precision. I slammed my foot on the gas as I turned the car toward the forest path. The creature caught up. I heard it slam into the vehicle. Then the rear window shattered violently. I didn't stop, didn't look back, The dirt road was rough, but I pushed the car as fast as it would go. Then a violent jolt. The creature had ripped the rear door clean off. With one pull, I kept driving, bouncing, and skidding down the uneven trail. I just wanted out. Then pain. Excruciating pain in my back. A hand, long clawed, reached inside, grasping blindly for me. I swerved hard. The car burst from the trees onto the paved road. The bottom scraped and sparked against the asphalt. I floored it, didn't care about anything else. The hand vanished, and I couldn't hear anything on the roof anymore. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black pickup truck race in the opposite direction, the same one as always. But I didn't stop, not even when I noticed blood dripping down my right arm, and my back felt like it was on fire. I drove all the way back to the train station. The fat man was there, waiting for me, but he wasn't smiling this time. He looked exhausted. It was nearly 4 a.m., and the parking lot was empty except for him. His eyes widened when he saw the car. The back door was missing, the vehicle torn up with deep gashes and scratches. I stepped out, pale and shaking, my uniform soaked in blood, a deep slash on my shoulder still leaking steadily. "I'll take you to a doctor, son," the fat man said quietly. That's the last thing I heard. I collapsed, either from the blood loss or from the weight of the nightmare I just lived through. I woke up in my apartment. It was daytime, and my wounds had been neatly treated. On my nightstand were some pills, and a piece of paper explaining how I should take them. Next to it was a thick envelope with my name on it. It hurt to move. Every part of my body ached, but I was curious about the envelope. Inside was a letter from the company. "Stephen, thank you for your service. On behalf of the company, we'd like to apologize for what happened and offer a small honorarium as a token of our appreciation. We hope to work with you again soon." The company, inside the envelope, was $10,000 in cash. I had never had that much money in my life. For a few days, I stayed locked inside my room. I didn't want to go out. I was looking for a job. I didn't want to work for the company again. The money was good, sure, but my life was more important. A few weeks later, my wounds were healing, and I found a job. The company messaged me twice, offering open shifts. I never replied. It was better that way. I worked at a 24-hour convenience store in a miserable part of town. The job sucked. My boss was a complete asshole, always yelling at everyone like we were dirt under his shoes. The pay was awful, barely enough to cover the bills. I was slowly burning through the money the company had given me. Most of my shifts were at night, and the only customers were drunk people, homeless folks, or shady weirdos buying God knows what. One night, I stood behind the register, watching a staggering homeless man dig through the alcohol shelf. I glanced outside. The streets were dark and empty, lit only by the flickering streetlights. And then I saw him, the man in the rabbit mask, still wearing his filthy, muddy tuxedo. He stood there on the other side of the glass, waving at me, beckoning me to come. I broke out in a cold sweat. I panicked. I wanted to run. I looked around, searching for a way out, but the figure outside was gone. Did I imagine it? Then my phone buzzed again. Another open shift. I looked around the store. The homeless guy was still shuffling through the vodka, and everything else was still bright and dull, as much as I was terrified. Deep down, I felt it. Something in me longed to go back. Not just for the money. The place was calling me. Maybe should I go back? Story 5. The lavatory rules. The day was supposed to be the same as any other. Even the air was the same. I was sitting in the last stall of the third-floor men's room, hiding from a world of spreadsheets and deadlines, procrastinating. The low, monotonous hum of the ventilation system filled the air, a futile attempt to overpower the faint but persistent smell of cheap disinfectant and something vaguely organic beneath it, a scent that always lingered in these corporate sanctuaries. From the next stall, I could hear the muffled tapping of a phone keyboard, a rhythmic sound that was a universal language of paid idleness. You know the feeling, the tranquility of a corporate afternoon, disturbed only by the echo of a dripping faucet in the otherwise silent room, lined with sterile white tiles. My mind was empty, filled with nothing but dull boredom and thoughts of the approaching weekend. Then it happened, distant, muffled sounds. First a single, sharp scream, quickly cut off as if muffled by a hand. Then a bang, hollow and heavy, like a filing cabinet falling over. And then, without any transition, the piercing, shrieking wail of the fire alarm. My first reaction wasn't fear, but irritation. Another drill. We'd be standing outside in the rain again, waiting to be let back to our spreadsheets. The sounds were filtered through layers of concrete and steel, distorted and confusing, as if coming from a great distance or from a strange dream. And then, as suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. The alarm died mid-cycle, leaving a phantom ringing in my ears. The screaming had been silenced. A deep, unnatural quiet fell. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy and oppressive, amplified by the dead acoustics of the tiled room. This sudden shift from noise to silence is a classic horror technique for building suspense. In that silence, for the first time, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. And then came the first heavy, wet thud. Not a knock. There was no living force behind it. It was a sound of dead weight slumping against the main restroom door. My body reacted before my brain could process the situation. I tasted the metallic, electric tang of pure adrenaline in my mouth. My heart began to pound against my ribs so hard it physically hurt. A cold sweat, smelling sharper, more acidic than usual. The scent of fear itself, full of stress hormones, ran down my back. My vision narrowed into a tight tunnel, my brain instinctively focusing all attention on the door, ignoring everything else. I was trapped. The principle of inevitability revealed itself in all its horror. There was no escape from this room. The environment itself had become my adversary. Every sound, every echo, was amplified and distorted by the hard, non-porous surfaces. The restroom wasn't just a place where I was stuck. It had become an active participant in my terror, a psychological weapon that intensified every wave of horror. In a fit of panic, as my thoughts raced wildly, a memory flashed through my mind. Carl, the guy from the night security team, had forgotten his walkie-talkie here an hour ago. He'd left it in the stall next to mine when he went to wash his hands. It was a spark of hope, a tangible goal that pulled me out of my paralyzing fear. Having a goal, no matter how small, was better than drowning in helplessness. The journey to it was the longest of my life. I had to crawl on the filthy, sticky floor under the partition. Every sound, the scuff of a shoe, the rustle of my pants, echoed like a gunshot in the silence. I felt vulnerable, humiliated, like an animal cornered. The floor was cold and damp. I could feel every pebble and dried stain. Finally, I clutched it in my hand. Cold, heavy plastic. I turned it on. Instead of a clear voice, there was only the loud hiss of static, a sound that underscored my isolation rather than alleviating it. I pressed the button, my fingers trembling. Hello? Is anyone there? This is Mark from accounting. Over. Silence. Just a crackle, like dying stars. And then, finally, a response. Carl's. But it wasn't his usual calm baritone. It was a distorted rasp, soaked in pain and panic, filtered through cheap electronics and hell that had broken loose on his end. Mark? Where the hell are you? Get out of there. Now. I can't, Carl. There's something at the door. What's happening? His reply came in fragments, interrupted by static and his own ragged breathing. Every word was torn from his lungs with immense effort. They're not people, Mark. They're not people. They're tearing flesh. God, they... His voice broke in a fit of coughing, wet and ragged. I got a scratch, just a scratch. It's nothing, but it burns. It burns like hell. In that moment, I understood. The walkie-talkie wasn't a tool of rescue. It was a direct line into the heart of the apocalypse. Instead of connecting me to the outside world, it trapped me in an intimate auditory relationship with a man who was dying and turning into a monster. Every crackle, Every distortion of his voice pulled me deeper into despair. I wasn't just a listener, I was a witness, trapped with Carl's dying voice in the receiver, my senses overloaded. I started to notice smells that weren't there before, the coppery tang of my own fierce sweat, and a faint, sweetish smell of rot that seemed to rise from the drains. Every detail in the room seemed menacing and hostile. The chrome-soaked dispenser cast distorted reflections. The grout between the tiles looked like dark scars. In a desperate, irrational attempt to do something, anything, to keep from thinking about the sounds outside, I looked into the toilet bowl. And there, deep in the drain, wedged in the bend of the S-trap, I saw something that didn't belong. A piece of plastic wrap. With a revulsion that mixed with desperate curiosity, I reached in and pulled out a small, slimy, plastic-wrapped piece of paper. It was covered in shaky, desperate handwriting. It was a list of rules. Rules that made no rational sense. It was a mixture of the mundane and the inexplicable, a hallmark of the internet creepypastas I sometimes read for amusement. But this wasn't amusing. This was a new, terrifying layer of reality being forced upon me. Rules. 1. Do not flush between 3 and 4 o'clock. It can hear. 2. 3. When the lights flicker 3 times, close your eyes. Do not open them until you hear the singing. 4. 5. The voice on the radio is not your friend, but it's all you have. 6. 7. Do not trust the mirrors. They lie about who is behind you. 8. 9. If the stall door moves on its own, offer a name, not your own. 10. These rules were not a guide for surviving zombies. They were a form of psychological warfare. They forced me to choose between rational action and ritualistic obedience. Rule 3 immediately sowed paranoia towards Carl, my only connection to the world. Rule 4 attacked my sensory perception, my ability to trust my own eyes. Rule 2 demanded a passive, faith-based act, closing my eyes in the face of threat, which contradicted every survival instinct. I knew that under extreme stress, the brain's ability to think rationally is impaired. These rules exploited that. They pushed me from logic toward paranoid, magical thinking. The real horror now lay not just in the monsters outside the door, but in the question. Were these rules just the ravings of a madman or the actual physics of this new, terrifying reality? I tested the rules immediately. Carl, I whispered into the radio, my voice trembling. I found a piece of paper here, with rules on it. Do you know anything about it? Carl's response was exactly what Rule 3 had predicted, a confused, irritated growl, punctuated by wheezing. What rules? Mark, snap out of it. Focus. You have to find. His voice was lost in a coughing fit that sounded like his lungs were tearing apart. Was he lying, or did he genuinely not know about them, which would make them even more sinister? My isolation deepened. I was alone, with a dying man and a mad list, and then his decomposition began. I was a sole witness, a helpless listener as his mind and body collapsed in real time. His transformation occurred in stages, which I followed through the distorted speaker of the walkie-talkie, and it was terrifyingly similar to clinical descriptions of delirium and psychotic states. Phase 1, coherent pain. His speech was strained but still logical. He described what he saw on the security monitors, trying to advise me. There are too many of them at the reception desk. They don't move fast, but they're strong. Mark, I saw them bend the steel server room door with their bare hands. They just pushed. Phase 2, feverish confusion. His voice grew hoarse, his breathing shallow and labored. He began to show signs of feverish delirium. He repeated himself, lost his train of thought, his sentences falling apart. The doors! You have to lock the doors. Did you lock them? Mark? Did you lock that scratch? It burns. Why does it burn so much? His thinking became disjointed, disorganized. Phase 3, paranoid delirium. The infection attacked his mind. He described hallucinations, shadows moving on the monitors, whispers and static. His paranoia, a key symptom of psychosis, turned against me. Why are you in that bathroom for so long? Are you waiting for them? Are you with them? I can hear you whispering to them. I know you're with them. His speech was now a mixture of lucid warnings and psychotic delusion, making him a completely unreliable narrator of the outside world. Phase 4, Animalistic Agony. The human part Carl was fading. His words devolved into gasps, pained whimpers, and finally, the guttural, wet gurgle of the infected. The last thing I heard wasn't words, but the sound of his humanity being violently extinguished. The sound of tearing flesh and cracking bone, transmitted with terrifying fidelity. Being limited to only sound, I was forced to experience his transformation much more intimately. The voice is a carrier of personality, and I was listening as one personality was erased, step by step, and replaced by something monstrous. This wasn't just a story about a monster. It was a tragedy about the destruction of a soul broadcast live. The pace quickened. The fluorescent light above my stall began to die. It flickered once, twice. The high, irritating buzz of a dying ballast cut into my ears, like an insect burrowing into my brain. Rule 2 throbbed in my head. When the lights flicker 3 times, close your eyes. I face an impossible choice. Trust the insane rule or maintain awareness of my surroundings. Rationality versus magic. Survival versus faith. The third flicker. Absolute, tangible darkness. In a spasm of pure terror, I obeyed. I squeezed my eyes shut. It was an act of surrender, a relinquishment of my rational mind to the cryptic authority of that piece of paper. And then the horror from my ears began. Sight was gone. Sound was everything. First, just as a rule I predicted, I heard a faint, ethereal singing. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the pipes. It was beautiful and, in its incongruity, utterly terrifying. It sounded like a choir, but without words, just a pure, mournful melody. Then the sound at the door changed. The mindless thudding stopped. It was replaced by a slow, intelligent, metallic scraping. Something was deliberately trying to get in, not with brute force, but with cunning. The shift from raw power to guile made the threat feel more personal and sinister. And finally, Carl's last transmission. It was no longer his voice. From a radio came a piercing scream of pure agony, a hideous wet gurgle, and a final, deafening click as the walkie-talkie went silent forever. The main lights buzzed back on, blindingly bright. The scraping and the singing were gone. The return to normal was more jarring than the darkness. The threat had demonstrated its ability to manipulate the environment, confirming that the rules were terrifyingly accurate. My rational understanding of the world had collapsed. When a person's model of reality shatters under extreme stress, they become susceptible to adopting alternative belief systems. And I had just found mine. I was left in a deafening silence. I stared at my reflection in the small piece of polished metal on the toilet paper dispenser. I remembered Rule 4. Do not trust the mirrors. They lie about who is behind you. For a split second in my mind, ravaged by stress and suggestion, I saw a figure in the reflection behind me, a tall, dark silhouette. I spun around, nothing, just white tiles. The ambiguity of whether it was a real supernatural event or a stress-induced hallucination was the core of my new madness. My perception was forever broken. I could no longer trust my own eyes. The scratching on my stall door began again, but it was different, softer. A single, deliberate tap, tap, tap. The handle moved slightly on its own, slowly, as if someone were gently testing it. I remember the last rule. If the stall door moves on its own, offer a name, not your own. It was a final, quiet, terrifying moment. I had no fight left in me. I had accepted the new reality. I looked at the dead walkie-talkie, the last relic of my connection to the rational world, and to the man who embodied its horrific end. In a quiet, trembling whisper, barely audible even in the tomb-like silence, I offered the only name I had left, the name that belonged to the voice that had guided me through death. Carl. The handle stopped moving, and then there was only silence. But I knew, deep in my mind, this wasn't the end. Story 6. My hernia surgery recovery isn't going as planned. I had a minor surgery last Thursday. Hernia repair. Nothing invasive, just laparoscopic. In and out. St. Emery Medical wasn't much to look at. Stained tile, buzzing fluorescence. That waiting room stink of sweat and lemon-scented bleach. But the nurses were polite. The anesthesiologist cracked a joke about counting backwards from 10. I remember the mask, the lights above me, the 4 burning cold in my arm. And then I woke up in the operating room. Not the same one. Or maybe just not the same anymore. The lights overhead were red and pulsing, dimmer than they should have been. The lens covers were clouded and rust-ringed. The walls were lined with trays of used gauze and metal tools, soaking in nothing. The smell was what hit me hardest. Not infection, preservation. Something pickled and raw, like blood that had been boiled and sealed. My wrists were strapped down, not with Velcro, with leather, old cracks soaked through. There was movement beside me. A nurse. That's what my brain told me first. Short skirt, white uniform stained to the hem. Her stockings were stretched tight over pale thighs, clinging with friction like they'd been pulled on over damp skin. Her mask pressed hard against her mouth, but you could see the shape beneath. Lips parted like she was always mid-breath. Her hips swayed with each step, but nothing about her was inviting. Her body moved like a threat, pretending to be a promise, like someone imitating seduction from memory. She leaned in close, her breath hot through the mask, brushing my ear like a secret. Gloved fingers traced my collarbone, then slid down my chest, slow, deliberate, like she was reading me in Braille. She paused below my waist, not in hesitation, in interest. Her hand slipped under the gown. The latex was cold at first, but it warmed as she moved, drawing soft circles lower and lower, like she was studying me, claiming me. All the while, she hummed a lullaby I didn't know, but somehow recognized. Another nurse entered behind her. Same uniform, darker stains. She moved like she wanted to be watched. Carried a surgical tray with both hands like it was a gift. The tools weren't clean, not even close. The scalpel had dried tissue curled around the tip. The clamp was rusted at the hinge, with a strip of tendon stretched across the mouth like jerky. One retractor had a wad of black hair snarled in the teeth. Gauze stuck to the tray beneath it all, stiff with blood, cracked at the folds. The second nurse raised a tray and tilted her head, like she was showing me her favorite toy. "You're prepped," she said. "You'll open so clean," the first nurse whispered, as she traced a finger across my stomach. Then I closed my eyes, just for a second. When I opened them again, the room was empty. The restraints were undone, still indented into my skin. No lights, no nurses, but I wasn't alone. I sat up. My gown clung to my back with something warm and sticky. The air was colder than it should have been. I stood. The hallway outside looked like the same hospital, but peeled open. Linoleum curled off the floor like dried skin. The fluorescent lights buzzed in pulses like a heartbeat. The walls were yellow tile, but rotting, damp, slick. Room 4 had a patient. The floor was stained in perfect loops, like someone had bled in spirals. There was 4 bags still hanging, half full of something black. The line dangled and twitched. A limbless torso lay on the bed, breathing through a rusted trach tube, its eyes fixed on me. Room 6 was worse. A woman sat upright in a padded chair. Her face twitched with every stitch. Her jaw was visibly broken or just never set right, her eyes wide and unblinking. She was sewing patterns into her own lap, using long threads of human tendon. Her hospital gown was hiked around her waist so she could work. I couldn't see all the designs, just that they were deep, intentional, and still wet. She smiled when she saw me. Her teeth didn't match. Room 9 was the worst. A man, maybe, braced backward over an exam table, limbs locked in metal restraints. His body was twisted in impossible angles by some cruel brace mechanism, every joint forced in the wrong direction. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. A nurse stood behind the glass, one hand resting on her hip, the other slowly rubbing her inner thigh through the fabric. When she noticed me watching, she didn't stop. She shifted her stance like she wanted to be seen, and when she did, her skirt lifted just enough to reveal it. My name, carved into the pale skin of her upper thigh, letter by letter. She traced over them with a gloved finger, never breaking eye contact. I moved past the nurse's station. One monitor was still on, showing a room I recognized. My bedroom. Me, sleeping, then static. I blinked again, and I was in recovery. White lights, warm blanket, apple juice in a plastic cup. You scared us, the nurse said. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. You were out a little longer than expected. I asked her how long. She just smiled. Eventually, they said I was free to go. Discharged. A cab dropped me off outside my building like nothing happened. Like it was just a normal procedure. But things felt wrong immediately. The apartment looked normal. Same couch, same coffee stain on the carpet, but the scar was too long. Curved, raised in a way that didn't match the procedure. The hallway outside my unit smelled like antiseptic and something sweet underneath. Not rot, sterilized rot. The fridge buzzed in a rhythm that was oddly familiar. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of heels on tile pacing just outside my bedroom. I got up to check the hallway, walked past the bathroom, and noticed the mirror was fogged. I hadn't taken a shower. I decided to look up St. Emery Medical because I needed answers. The website was gone. I found an archived article, local paper. Said the hospital shut down 2 years ago. Unexplained deaths. Patient files vanished. An anonymous source claimed some staff were doing things that didn't follow medical procedures, extra incisions, strange scarring patterns, markings that didn't show up on any charts. My surgeon's name was listed. Dr. Lara. No trial. No charges. Just location unknown. It's been days. The apartment's changing. The tile behind the fridge has yellowed and cracked. The hallway smells stronger now, like bleach trying to cover something deeper. The lights hum in a way I've only ever heard in one place. And the door, I haven't opened it. Not since that night. But I hear movement on the other side. Gurneys rolling. Heels on tile. Steel trays clattering like teeth. I'm posting this now while I still can. While the modem blinks and the laptop stays cool. If you're reading this, check your scar. If it's curved. If it hums. If you wake up and the walls are wet, you're already in it. You just haven't noticed yet. I blinked again, and I was in recovery. White lights. Warm blanket. Apple juice in a plastic cup. You scared us, the nurse said. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. You were out a little longer than expected. I asked her how long. She just smiled. Eventually, they said I was free to go. Discharged. A cab dropped me off outside my building like nothing happened. Like it was just a normal procedure. But things felt wrong immediately. The apartment looked normal. Same couch. Same coffee stain on the carpet. But the scar was too long. Curved. Raised in a way that didn't match the procedure. The hallway outside my unit smelled like antiseptic and something sweet underneath. Not rot, sterilized rot. The fridge buzzed in a rhythm that was oddly familiar. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of heels on tile pacing just outside my bedroom. I got up to check the hallway, walked past the bathroom, and noticed the mirror was fogged. I hadn't taken a shower. I decided to look up St. Emery Medical because I needed answers. The website was gone. I found an archived article, local paper. Said the hospital shut down 2 years ago. Unexplained deaths. Patient files vanished. An anonymous source claimed some staff were doing things that didn't follow medical procedures, extra incisions, strange scarring patterns, markings that didn't show up on any charts. My surgeon's name was listed. Dr. Lara. No trial. No charges. Just location unknown. It's been days. The apartment's changing. The tile behind the fridge has yellowed and cracked. The hallway smells stronger now, like bleach trying to cover something deeper. The lights hum in a way I've only ever heard in one place. And the door, I haven't opened it. Not since that night. But I hear movement on the other side. Gurneys rolling. Heels on tile. Steel trays clattering like teeth. I'm posting this now while I still can. While the modem blinks and the laptop stays cool. If you're reading this, check your scar. If it's curved, if it hums, if you wake up and the walls are wet, you're already in it. You just haven't noticed yet. Story 7. Something is breathing inside my house. I'm writing this in the dark. Under my covers, phone brightness turned all the way down. I don't know what else to do. This started 3 nights ago. I live alone in a small one-story house at the edge of town. It's quiet, peaceful even. Or it was. I don't scare easily. I grew up with 2 older brothers who made it their mission to toughen me up. I've watched horror movies alone since I was 10. I sleep with the windows open. I don't jump at creaks or groans. But this is different. The first night, I thought I was dreaming. I woke up around 2:17 a.m. Not because of a noise, but because of a feeling like I was being watched. I sat up and listened. Silence. Then I heard it. A slow, deep inhale, followed by an even slower exhale. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, like someone was trying to make sure I heard it. But the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was in the house. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by my bed and walked through every room. Nothing. I even checked under the bed and in the closet, just to feel like I wasn't going crazy. But the sound had stopped. I chalked it up to a weird dream and went back to sleep. Night 2 was worse. This time, the breathing started before I even fell asleep. I was brushing my teeth and heard it. The same inhale, exhale. I froze. It was coming from the hallway. I turned the bathroom light off and waited, toothbrush still in hand. The breathing continued. Closer. Then it stopped. I stayed in that bathroom for what felt like hours. When I finally stepped into the hall, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. I left every light in the house on that night. Tonight is night 3. I tried playing music. I tried falling asleep to TV. Nothing worked. Around 1:30, everything went quiet. My phone started glitching. Spotify stopped playing. My TV went black. Then the breathing started again. Only this time, it was right outside my bedroom door. It sounded bigger than before, like whoever or whatever it is getting closer. It stood there for almost an hour, breathing. I didn't move. I couldn't. And then the doorknob turned, just slightly, just enough to make me know it wasn't the wind. I whispered for it to go away. I don't know why. I think I just needed to say something. That was 10 minutes ago. The breathing stopped, but I haven't heard footsteps. It didn't walk away. It didn't open the door. It's just quiet now. Too quiet. Earlier today, I bought a couple cheap cameras off Amazon and set them up, one facing the front door, one in the hallway, and one outside my bedroom. I checked the footage before bed. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. The section of the hallway, right by my bedroom door, was more pixelated than the rest, like a bad compression artifact. But it didn't make sense. The lighting was the same. The other parts of the hallway were clear, but this one spot, right where I keep hearing the breathing, it shimmered, almost like static. I rewound the footage. Same distortion, frame after frame. Nothing moved, but something was there. I told my brother about everything. He's the oldest, the skeptic, the one who always said ghosts were just drafts and paranoia. He laughed at first, but I guess I sounded serious enough because he offered to drive down and spend the night. I didn't argue. He got here about an hour ago. We set up in the living room, both of us with bats by our sides like it was some kind of sleepover from hell. We didn't talk much. I think part of him wanted to prove me wrong. I almost hoped he would. He dozed off on the couch a while ago. But here's the thing. There's breathing again. Deep, steady, louder than before. And it's coming from somewhere near the kitchen. But every time I glance over at my brother, he's completely still. Not snoring, not shifting, just still. And yet, the breathing doesn't stop. That was hours ago. I must have fallen asleep with the bat in my hand. When I woke up, The sun was starting to rise. My brother was gone. No note, no message. His car keys were still on the counter, his shoes by the door. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, even the crawl space under the house. Nothing. Just gone. I checked the cameras. At 3:08 a.m., the front door cam glitched out completely. Static, then black. The hallway cam flickered, but stayed on. At 3:11, I saw the shimmer again, the same pixelated stretch by my bedroom door. And then, for just one frame, it stretched, like something moving through it. The weirdest part? There was no footage of my brother leaving. No sign of the door opening. No shadows. Just a shimmer growing, distorting the entire frame, then vanishing. And now, tonight, just now, the breathing has returned. But it's not in the hallway. It's coming from above me. I don't have an upstairs. I'm posting this because if something happens to me, someone should know. I'm not crazy. Something is breathing in my house, and I think it's still here. Story 8. I still hear the voice from our film, even though we never recorded it. I was hired as a boom operator on a low-budget drama shooting in rural Pennsylvania. 4-person crew, 6 actors, 1 week of filming. The director, Ben, was one of those serious indie guys who spoke softly and used the word cinema without irony. We shot at a small farmhouse that belonged to one of Ben's relatives. Isolated, quiet, barely any signal. It still had power and running water, though, so it worked. The film was a character drama about 2 brothers arguing over what to do with their late father's home. It was simple and intimate. No horror. Nothing supernatural. The first strange thing happened on day 2. I was reviewing audio that night alone in the kitchen. Most of it sounded normal. But in take 3 of scene 14, I heard something odd. After one of the actors finishes his line, there's a pause. Then I heard a voice I didn't recognize say, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't one of the actors. I rewatched the footage. Both of them were in the shot, and neither one spoke. The voice was low, muttered, like it was meant to be heard only by someone listening closely. I asked Ben about it the next morning. He brushed it off and said it was probably me breathing too close to the boom mic. That wasn't it. I know what my breathing sounds like. I let it go. Then the script changed. Not officially. There were no new drafts or revisions emailed to us. But that night, one of the actresses, Mallory, asked me if she'd been supposed to say something about the basement. I didn't remember any line about a basement. She showed me her printed copy. Page 23. There was a handwritten line in the margins that said, "He's still down there. I heard him moving again." It didn't match her handwriting or pen. I checked my own script. That line wasn't there. We weren't even filming near the basement. Nothing in the story involved anyone being down there. I showed it to Ben. He laughed and said Mallory was probably just playing a prank. The next night, we lost power during a thunderstorm. Everything shut off. No lights, no cameras. But the old cassette deck in the living room clicked on. It played static for a few seconds. Then a voice, that same low voice from before, said, "We're not done filming." We had never used that cassette deck. Nobody knew it even worked. Nobody had touched it. Mallory left the next morning. She didn't say goodbye. She just got in her car and drove off. Ben insisted we finish. He said the weirdness was feeding the atmosphere of the shoot. At that point, I was too tired to argue. We only had a couple days left. On the 5th day, we filmed a quiet scene with the lead sitting in a bedroom. It was just one shot, pushing slowly toward the door from the hallway. No dialogue, natural light. When we reviewed the footage, we saw something we hadn't seen in the room. There was already someone sitting in the chair when the shot started. Just a silhouette, faint and blurry. But there, the actor walks into the room near the end of the shot, and by the time he gets there, the chair is empty. No cuts, no tricks, just gone. Ben said we should keep it. Said it adds mystery. That was when I decided to leave. I packed my gear and walked off set that night. Didn't get paid. Didn't care. A few days ago, a link showed up in my inbox from one of the PAs. She found a rough cut of the movie uploaded to Vimeo. It was under a different title. He's still down there. That was never the name of the project. I didn't watch it, but the thumbnail is just a black frame, maybe from a night scene. In the corner, barely visible, there's a shape. Someone sitting just watching, not one of the actors. Not anyone I recognize. I close the tab. I haven't opened it again. But sometimes when I'm alone and things are quiet, I think I can still hear that voice. We're not done filming. Story 9. He knows where I am. He knows who I am, because he was me first. I don't know how much time I have left. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to escape him. The shadow behind every step I take. The breath in my neck I can never shake. I thought I could outsmart him, hide from him, but he knows everything. Everything about me. This is my last warning. It started with small things. My phone would buzz when no one had messaged. My door, locked tight, was found unlocked sometimes. Footsteps behind me on empty streets. At first, I thought it was paranoia, but paranoia doesn't send pictures of you sleeping, with the lights off, your eyes wide open, frozen in terror. He sent me those. He watches me, knows who I talk to, where I go, what I eat. He's inside my life, a parasite feeding off my fear. I can't even trust my own reflection anymore, because I'm scared he's looking through my eyes. Then the messages started. Short, twisted, psychotic lines dripping with bloodlust. I'm closer than you think. Soon you'll scream for mercy. I see your soul. It's mine. I tried to tell someone. The cops laughed it off. Said it was probably a sick joke. But last night was the proof I needed. I woke up to a sound. Wet, dragging noises coming from the kitchen. I froze. There he was, standing in the shadows, his face twisted into a sick grin smeared with blood. In his hand, a knife dripping with gore. On the floor, the body of my best friend, his throat torn open like a ripped book. "You're next," he whispered. His eyes were hollow, a black abyss sucking all hope from the room. I ran, but there's nowhere to run when the hunter knows every path, every lock, every shadow you hide behind. He left me a gift this morning, my own phone with pictures of me, asleep in my bed. But the final photo chilled me to the bone, me, eyes wide open, staring straight into the camera, but not me. Someone else's face was carved into my skin. I couldn't scream. My mouth was dry, throat tightening like iron chains. I stared at that image frozen, heart pounding so loud, I thought it would burst through my ribs. Then I noticed something worse. The timestamp on the photo was from last night, after I'd gone to bed. But I don't remember waking up. I don't remember anything after midnight. My hands shook as I scrolled through the rest of the pictures. The images grew darker, more twisted. My bedroom ceiling, but stained with thick red smears. Close-ups of my hands, trembling, blood crusted under my fingernails. A blurred photo of a shadow slipping behind the door. Too fast to make out, but enough to freeze my blood. Then came a video file titled "Your Last Hour." I didn't want to watch it, but my eyes betrayed me. The video started with a shaky handheld camera. My bedroom, dark except for the flicker of a dying candle. The camera panned slowly over the room, revealing a trail of dark, sticky blood leading to the closet. The closet door creaked open on its own. The camera shakily zoomed in, and I saw it. A pile of torn flesh and skin, grotesque and pulsating like a nightmare-made flesh. Amid the gore, something moved. A pale hand crawled out, fingers twitching like a spider. Then a face emerged, distorted, unrecognizable, but mine, or the twisted version of me. The camera dropped to the floor with a thud. I heard ragged breathing, low growls, and then the whisper, "I'm already inside you." I dropped the phone. My mind shattered. Suddenly, the room's silence was broken by a wet, scraping noise from the closet. I wasn't alone. I backed away, heart hammering. The closet door slammed open violently. A figure stepped out, a grotesque mirror of myself, covered in bloody scars. Skin hanging in strips, eyes black voids burning with madness. His mouth split in a sick grin, teeth sharp and stained red. "You wanted to know who's been watching you," he hissed. "I am you, the darkness you tried to bury." I tried to run, but he moved faster than humanly possible, grabbing me with hands like iron traps. Pain exploded as his nails dug into my flesh, ripping my skin. Blood poured like a river, mixing with the cold sweat on my face. As I gasped for air, struggling, the last thing I saw was my own lifeless body lying on the floor, with that same carved face staring back at me. Then darkness swallowed me whole. They say madness is a disease you catch alone. But what if madness isn't just a sickness? What if it's a parasite? An invisible infection that grows inside your mind, slowly twisting your perception of reality until you don't know where you end and the darkness begins. Because the body on the floor, that wasn't just a corpse. It was the real me, the version of me who was aware, who wanted to live. The stalker wasn't some outside monster hunting me down. He was a fractured fragment of my own psyche, a violent, relentless split personality that had taken over. Every memory I thought was mine, every shadow I feared, every whisper behind me, that was him acting out, wearing my face like a mask while the real me was trapped inside my own head, screaming in silence. So if you ever find yourself watching your own back, feeling like someone knows every step you take, be careful. Because sometimes the scariest predator isn't out there in the dark. Sometimes it's the monster waiting inside your own mind, and it's already one step ahead. Story 10. My daughter is missing in Whitehall National Park. My daughter went missing a week ago. No one seems to have noticed. They look at this thing like it's my daughter. But I know better. I was there when whatever wanted her took her away, replaced her. My husband and I have been going through a rough patch since the beginning of this year. Small things were building to be larger arguments, until we didn't want to be around each other day to day. Separation was looming. But we were doing everything in our power to keep that at bay. One random evening, after a long argument, I felt a call to our garage. While sorting through totes full of dead air and stored away winter clothes, I found a tote full of our summer memories from when our daughter was 5 years old. We had been happy then. Arguments were non-existent in our home. There seemed to be too much warmth there for them to cultivate. We would plan fun dinners and even more joyful outings. It felt like it was ages ago, when in reality it was just a few years past. While flipping through the stacks of albums and drawings from our daughter, I found a feather. It looked to be a hawk feather or something closely related, but larger and freckled with deep black spots. My husband had found it while we were camping at Whitehall National Park. It had been laying on our camping gear when we had awoken one morning. He packed it away carefully, as a memento from one of our many camping trips. We had done research on it when we had gotten home, but had never been able to place the bird it fell off of. I brought it into our dining room, laying it on the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Later on we sat together, with masks of a happy family on our faces for our daughter, while eating our chicken and broccoli amalgamation. My husband had been absent-mindedly staring at the feather while eating, before he announced that we should go camping again. like we used to. The excited gaggle of incomprehensible words our daughter let out was enough for me to agree, even if I did not feel up to being feasted on by deer flies that weekend. Her excitement could light up a room. It was hard to say no. Before we knew it was Friday, and we were packed and heading to Whitehall. Our daughter's excitement had gotten to us. We were becoming more and more keen on the trip as we got closer. Maybe this would be the thing that brought us back together. We found a spot near the Whitehall River, a spot that was sought after but surprisingly void of campers when we arrived. It was private, much deeper into the forest than the other campsites. We set up our area, and then traversed the trails looking for dried sticks to build our fire. Our daughter took off ahead of us, wanting to lead the way on our small adventure. My husband lightly grabbed my hand, leaving room for me to remove it, but instead I grasped it as we walked. It felt right. Soon enough we had enough sticks to start a fire, so we headed back to our campsite, our daughter once again leading the way. She had found a feather exactly like the one we found in the past. She was waving it in front of her like a conductor as we walked. We sat together around our small fire, while our daughter asked us 1,000,001 questions about how grass got its color, or how the stars sat so close together, or if trees could feel love. And with each question we answered as well as we could. She started to zone off as the fire got warmer and the night got darker, and soon enough she was sleeping in her small camp chair. We carried her off to our tent, and came back out to talk and watch the fire crackle some more. I never felt myself fall asleep, but I did feel my husband shaking me awake. Violet isn't in the tent. Is the thing that knocked me out of my tired stupor. I followed behind him to check, as if he would ever make up such a gross joke. I only really believed him when I laid eyes on her disheveled sleeping bag. Immediately we started yelling her name, getting louder and louder as we heard no answer back. My mind kept telling me she'd be around this corner, or she would be in this pile of drying brush. But each time there would be no sign of her. There were no footprints or scuffles in the dirt. The sun was still deep in the mountains. It wouldn't be light out for hours, and our girl was deeply afraid of the dark. She would never leave our campsite, at least not her own volition. But there were no signs of someone struggling to take her away. She was a smart one. She'd never just follow someone deep into the forest without waking us. My husband decided to head to the front of the park to get the rangers. He kept trying to call their emergency number, but the lack of cell service kept rearing its ugly head. He took off in our small SUV as fast as he could, leaving me alone to scream and search for her. Soon enough the screaming became pleading, begging the forest to bend until I could see her and know she's safe. While searching, I found myself going deeper into the brush, not really caring at this point if I got lost with her. I found myself in a small clearing. It felt like it was perfectly shaped into place in this forest, even though no logging or cutting was allowed here. Sitting in the middle of the clearing, I could see a small hunched form. Their back was arched, unnaturally deep in its bend, with an oddly shaped shirt covering the bottom half, and their long dark hair was hiding their face from view. Rushing over, I was sure it was my daughter, my Violet. But once I reached her, my mind could not catch up with what I was seeing. There aren't really any words to describe what was happening before me. The hunched form was holding its ankles, its face hidden between its knees, while small muffled whines came from it. Its hair was shortening itself, the follicles eating at a length and pulling it back into its roots. The part of its spine that I could see was shaping itself, forming and cutting against the papery skin along its back until it joined the arch of the person hunched with it, popping itself into place when it found the bend it wanted. It sounded awful, painful, and so loud in this open space. What I thought was a shirt was actually feathers, molting and popping themselves off the thing's back, leaving white pockmarked pale skin in its place. The holes pulled themselves closed, sinew reaching across the space, until only skin was left. It heard me come upon it. I could see it try to pick its head up from its spot to look at me, but their rigid neck kept their head in place until it was done doing what was needed. My mind told me to run away, but my feet kept me firmly in place. The only thing I could do was witness this transformation. I'm not really sure what else to call it. Once the spine had found its home, their legs began forming, cracking in and out of place in a painful show. The form finally pulled its head away, in what seemed to be agony, but there wasn't really any way to tell. Its mouth hadn't formed yet. When it moved its head back, seemingly to wail, there were only eyes, one much bigger than the other. The rest of its face was moving. Its cheekbones would push out and then pull themselves down the pale, unmarked skin, and then back into place under their eyes. Their lower lash line would reach down so deep into their face, over the moving cheekbones and away from the raw red of their scara, before making its way back to where it liked. Their legs kept cracking, lengthening, and shortening themselves, almost unable to find the right place until the soft tissue of their knee rippled and kept the bone where it wanted it. I never saw the malform. Their legs kept my full attention until I heard a guttural gasp enter the space around us. Looking up, trailing my eyes across moving skin and tissue connecting, my eyes found the creature's mouth. It was open in a mimicry of a cry, but just couldn't take that shape yet, or it didn't know how to. Finally, the lips found their shape, broken and plastered across a deeply white face, and too close to their eyes to make sense. The gums inside started to bleed heavily, leaving rivers down the sides of its cheeks, until one by one, pockets opened up to push rounded teeth out. This seemed to be the most painful part for the writhing thing. Its scream finding its way out of its throat and into the clearing. The noise pushed me out of my frozen daze. A primal part ticked away at my very cells until I threw my body to run back to the cleaning opening. I turned myself away, falling when my feet couldn't catch up with my mind. Pushing myself up, I didn't look back as I started to make my way in any direction that was away from that thing, until I heard it try to say something. Something so familiar it stopped me almost dead in my tracks. Unmistakingly, and in a voice I've heard since my daughter could speak, the thing pushed out the words. Ma, mum. I looked around, hoping to see signs of my husband or a sign of anything that belonged in the world I knew before seeing this thing. My eyes found the only shape of a person in the tree line, my Violet. She was standing there, next to something unimaginably tall, crooking itself down so it could reach her hand better. She looked terrified. I screamed out her name, but it was as if she couldn't see or hear me. She was staring at the monstrous form behind me, watching it take its shape. I threw myself in her direction, leaving the squirming thing behind me. As I was getting closer, the form holding her took a step back into the reaching dark, the black seeping around them like a mist, taking my unwilling daughter with it. She fought to get away, but the form had no issue pulling her along. Finally, I had made it to the trees. She was in the middle of the dark seeping away, leaving only the forest. While searching for any sign of her, something grabbed me from behind and pulled me back into the clearing. I started clawing and pushing away, until my husband's face came into view, terrified but with a sheen of relief plastered across it. As I was about to tell him everything that I had seen, my eyes looked past him and saw the rangers wrapping a blanket around a small girl in the middle of the cleaning. My daughter's eyes were staring back at me. That thing had found its shape finally. That shape was my sweet girl, Violet. The scream that released from me was unbidden. I started to push myself away from him once again, the relief changing into terror as I fought to get away. I learned later an EMT had joined the Rangers with my husband and administered a sedative to me. They all thought the panic had caused and go into some sort of episode. How do I tell them the thing sitting in the ambulance with us isn't my daughter? That my daughter was still out there in the dark forest? I tried to tell my husband, whispering to him what happened in case the thing could hear, but he just seemed to get more incredulous as I spoke. How could he believe me when the thing sitting 2 feet away looked so much like her? It talked like her, joked like her, questioned the EMTs exactly like my daughter would. I started to believe that maybe I made the whole thing up until we got home. Small things weren't right. This Violet hated foods my daughter adored. She didn't have certain scars my daughter had, or they were misshapen and slightly above their original spot. Her freckles were darker and sat higher on her cheeks than they used to. My husband would stare at her sometimes. Her mannerisms made her seem like a stranger at moments. It felt like he was starting to realize she wasn't right, but then she'd do something unmistakably Violet, and he'd laugh it off and go back to his normal routine. This thing was not my daughter, and I was the only one who knew or cared. Even the thing didn't seem to understand it. It would spend its day acting as Violet did. It would go to school, come home and eat dinner with us, ask us to read stories, and stay up late to watch SpongeBob on TV. Sometimes I would find it staring off, either out the windows or into space, as if it was entranced. It would feel me watching and shake itself out of its stupor, and ask me a question only Violet could come up with. A few days after it all happened, I couldn't take it anymore. I left late in the night, and found myself driving back to Whitehall. I was the only one who knew she was still out there, alone and scared. I had to find her, even if it meant I got lost in the deep black forest with her. I searched for hours, until it became light, and until the light turned into a humid burn from the sun. My husband found me at the trailhead, sweaty and dirty, almost 11 hours after I had left. He had used a Find My iPhone feature to see where I was. He held me as I sobbed, while he thought of how he was losing his wife to insanity. All I could think about is how we lost our baby to a feathered thing in the forest.